We've got a quorum, 5 people. We're waiting for Claire, but we're going to keep going. We are joined by the Board of Selectmen. They've got 3 members here, and we're going to change the order of the agenda around a little bit so that we can deal with our differences with them so that they can leave when they're ready to leave.
Thank you.
Okay? So have you called your meeting to order?
We're all set.
Okay, so you're set, okay. All right. Okay, so we've got the Brian spreadsheet back up here, the one that is very helpful because it compares Board of Selectmen, current recommendation to advisory. So let's just knock out the current year budget first because there was only 2 differences last week, and we may be down to 1, and it's pretty small. So the only 2 differences we had last week with the actual operational budget was the MTC, the Municipal Technology Committee, and the Open Space Committee. Since last week, I've talked to the Board of Selectmen Chair, Ms. Braccio, and she has said that I think Ms. Fanoff met with Ms. Gillespie, and Ms. Gillespie is fine with the $2,000 budget rather than the $3,000 that she originally requested. Sounds right to me because Ms. Gillespie called me, I don't know, a month and a half ago and asked to come in front of advisory, and I haven't heard from her since. So it sounds like she is okay with $2,000, but Ms. Fanoff, can you confirm that?
She is, and she also signed a budget sheet for us, confirming my conversation with her and Mr. Perkins.
So everybody remember last week we decided that she should have the $3,000 she asked for, but apparently she's happy with 2. So does anyone discuss this one further? Do we just want to agree to the 2, vote and say 2, she's fine, so we're fine? Anybody disagree?
No.
Okay, so somebody make a motion to confirm that the Open Space Committee budget is going to be $2,000.
So I move that the Open Space Committee will be $2,000.
Second.
All in favor? Claire? You look stunned. 6? Okay, so 6-0. Okay, that knocks off the first one, okay? So the only other one as far as operational budget is MTC. So quick background, they asked for $5,000. Board of Selectmen approved 1. They don't have any specific use for it, but they just wanted to make sure they had some money so that if they did need to hire an outside consultant to get some expertise that they don't have in the committee, they'd have it available to do it. So last week, we struck sort of a compromise between the 5 and the 1. We voted for $3,500. So that's where we are right now, is a recommendation from advisory $3,500. Board of Selectmen has $1,000. So anyone want to take this one as far as trying to get this one over the finish line? We don't need to go to the town meeting with a $2,500 difference. It'd be kind of silly. Okay, so we need to come to an agreement.
Can we just agree with the $1,000 number, but send the clear message to that committee that to the extent that they have a need during the course of the year, that they could come back and we can then address it at that point? I don't want to spend a half an hour at town meeting going over $2,500, and I'm not sure the majority of the residents would like to, but if there's that degree of flexibility in the transfer, our transferability, that's what I would propose.
So Mr. Mooney is suggesting that we support the $1,000 recommended by the Board of Selectmen, but let the committee know that if they were to have a project that they need some money for, as far as consultant goes, that advisory would entertain a reserve fund transfer.
Well, I think what Mr. Rooney said is that's the spirit of what we were talking about before, right? If they had something that they wanted to spend money on that was a good spend, we supported it. They just didn't have anything concrete at the time. So if there's that flexibility where we can do that through the year, I think that's fine.
Well, reserve fund is for unanticipated expenditures, emergency nature, non-emergency nature, but unanticipated. So you probably could fit this under that definition. Right now, we don't know of what they want to do, so there's no consulting project that's anticipated, so it probably works.
If I can also, they also ended that there would be a corresponding or likely corresponding benefit to the town in terms of their additional work to save the town money, which I think would be very persuasive. We just don't have that in front of us at this point.
Ms. Braccio?
if I may, just, the board is also in support of doing that as well, leaving it at the 1,000. And just for your reference, we would support a transfer as well.
Judy? I agree. Claire? Anybody else? Okay, so somebody want to make a motion to approve the $1,000 that the Board of Selectmen have recommended?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. All right, so at this point, we agree with Board of Selectmen as far as the operational budget, so we're done with that piece of it. Okay. All right, so the other differences are with the FY '20 articles and budget capital, so let's go to that one. All right, so let's just take these one at a time again. You know, sometimes it's really hard to get to the bottom of numbers and really make sure you understand it. So I'm going to start off, then everybody please, we'll go one at a time as far as adding to this. So I've talked to a lot of people about the first one, so this is what I know. Right now, we've got a fiber line that the town owns that goes between where the server is on the senior center. It goes to the library, it goes to the townhouse. That was $30,000 a couple years ago. 23,000 or so have been spent for that, so there's 7,000 left in that warrant article. Tom LaFlame says that's more than enough that is needed to now run that line over the street to the public safety building. So there's enough money to get public safety hooked up to the existing fiber line. This is to replace the copper line that comes from the Overlook Drive repeater down to the, currently, the old police station. It will come down, of course, to the new building now. It's going to hook into the current fiber line at the corner of 85 and 30. The current copper line apparently is corroded, it's been eaten, whatever, so it needs to be replaced. So Tom LaFlame has gone to Verizon, and Verizon is willing to replace it, but not with a fiber line. They want to replace it with a copper line, which he doesn't understand. But he says they insist that's what they're going to use if they replace it. So he's proposed the town to do again what they did before, is to put their own private fiber line in, going from Overlook Drive to the corner of 85 and 30. He thinks he's got the proposal. He says that's a good number. Won't need more than that. Because he's doing that, which of course is a digital line, they're also going to have to upgrade the infrastructure, at least up there, possibly where the other repeater is at EMC, but I don't understand why that would be affected, but that's what I've been told. So what the one number I can't get my arms around, because everybody I talk to doesn't know the answer. So I've talked to Mr. Purple, I've talked to Chief Paulus, I've talked to Tom LaFlame, and none of the three know where the numbers are coming from for, can we go to the budget capital one real quick, Brian? Okay, now go back to FY '20 article, sorry. Okay, so here, so the $70,000 right here is to upgrade the infrastructure to let this fiber line work that we're talking about spending the $30,000 on. But I haven't seen where it's coming from. Tom LaFlame doesn't know where the number's coming from. So I'm not sure that we've really got our arms around that number yet, like we should have. So there's that. So we've got 70 there. Tom LaFlame says he's got 25,000 in the fiscal, in his department's fiscal year 19 budget to go to that. So we know where 95,000 is. I just don't know what the total cost is. Nor do I know why they have to do anything on the EMC property, because this has nothing to do with the EMC line. He says down the road they want to put fiber on that one too, but that's not what we're talking about. That 30,000 is from Overlook Drive down to 85 and 30. Okay, so there's still a question on that 70,000 bucks. But the 30 is, it looks like he's got a good number for it. He seems to think fiber is better than copper. I'm not sure that Mr. Litt agrees with that. But because Verizon won't put fiber, we've decided to do fiber ourselves. So that's the rationale behind us doing that. Okay, so there's that one. So let's keep going. Basement waterproofing. So there's a lot of, go ahead.
Can we talk about, we're going to be voting on these individually?
Yeah, we're going to try to vote tonight if we can.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we talk, I still don't understand the private fiber issue, because it's my understanding that at least there's some people in town of the opinion that we should not be having private fiber as part of the town budget.
That's a true statement.
So based upon what I know now and what you just presented, I'm still not ready to vote on that issue. so you know.
So John Butler is one of the citizens that is adamantly opposed to us buying our own lines. He thinks it's the maintenance thing. He doesn't think that we should be in the business of owning lines. Let Verizon handle it. It's theirs. They've got to maintain it. So that's his core reason for doing that. So he's one of the ones that is pretty vociferous about letting Verizon do this. And Verizon will do it, but they're going to do it with copper instead of fiber. So it's not like they're not good. They will do it, but they won't do it with fiber. And to make it more complicated, and Mr. Litt, you please, if I'm wrong about this, if it's still copper, I assume that it's still going to be analog going through the copper? No, it's going to be digital, no matter what?
I've not seen the details of this, and if someone showed them to me, I'd be happy to offer a real opinion. But fundamentally, there's a choice to be made that says, does the town want to own that line, or is it buying the bits from Verizon?
Okay, you'll have to come to the mic to talk to us.
If the town buys the connection from Verizon, the town shouldn't care whether it's carrier pigeons, copper, fiber, or water pipes. I mean, it really
Because
doesn't. It doesn't
Verizon
matter.
has to maintain
Because
it.
Verizon has to maintain it, and you're buying a service level that says, you know, I want to get information from here to there at this speed, you know, with these other guarantees, you go do it.
Okay, but answer the question. If it's copper, it's still going to be digital?
It can be digital, it can be analog, right.
Because
The
if you
question
don't
is-
decide that, then how do you know what to do with the repeater?
A plan has to decide that, but in
Okay.
terms of the technology, it's up to Verizon. What you buy, when you buy something from Verizon, you buy a plug on both ends, and you plug into it. And you can say, I want to plug in digital, I want to plug in analog, whatever you do. And there may be some converter box, but that's all.
Okay,
you know,
but it's the
that's the
town's
question.
job to fix the infrastructure up there. Whatever has to be done, we're going to pay for that.
Right, well, you can keep the same infrastructure and put a converter box on, you know, either end, and you're done,
Okay?
right?
So
On the
I
other
agree,
hand.
we don't have enough information to decide on this one.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I
there may be financial reasons, like the reasoning that was given for the other fiber project, which Mr. Butler also objected to, was that if you looked at it financially, it was cheaper for the town to do it rather than continuing to pay Verizon, and you got higher speeds in the bargain. I have not seen the analysis for this one, so I don't have an
Well,
opinion.
the other one, we're saving about $6,000 a year because we've got to pay for one service instead of 3 services, right? And then 4 if you put public safety in there. So that one's a pretty fast payback. This one is a really slow payback because we won't pay, there's a service we'll get rid of here, but it's nowhere near what we got rid of.
It's not clear that we need the high speeds here, because all we're doing is replacing a T1 line, I think, for radio repeater, and you're not going to have more radio in 5 years than you do. Well, you may in 5 years, but you're not in the next 2 or 3.
Okay, so thank you.
So this is a current issue that we have today, though, right? Like, this is not related to the new public safety building. We have dead spots in town that we can't communicate back to dispatch and the stations,
The issue-
right?
Chief Palace, yes.
The issue today is that Verizon has not been maintaining that copper line that goes between our current facility and the radio repeater. They're still charging, you know, for the bits, but they're not maintaining it.
Yeah, so in my mind, this is a current public safety
It's a current issue.
that we need, that I think, regardless of where it's coming from, we need to get it resolved. And I think we probably need to follow up with the fire department as well as police, because they're the ones that understand the radio infrastructure.
If it is a Verizon maintenance issue, do we know, has there been any outreach or effort to address or have Verizon address this maintenance issue such
So-
that we don't have to spend $30,000 of town money?
So that was the observation that I made when this came up at MTC. Remember, I'm just not a member of the public there as I am here. But I asked that question, and I don't believe that an answer has come back to any MTC meeting that I've been at.
And FYI, Mr. Rooney and I, we're on the Public Safety Building Committee, so as part of our budget, there's a whole new radio system being bought for about $350,000, but it doesn't include what we're talking about. It's just the radio system itself. And so now we're trying to make sure it all works, right? So that you're not spending this money and you still can't communicate. right? So this is outside the public safety building budget, what we're talking about. It's
Yeah,
not
the
part of it.
repeaters apparently are old, but, you know, whether old means broken, like I say, that's not something I can help with this evening.
Okay, all right. So we agree we don't have enough info for this one.
As Chelsea noted, I mean, to the extent it's an issue relative to public safety, I'm not adverse to spending the $30,000, but my question is if there's a responsibility that Verizon has to address it, which apparently we don't know the answer to that, then I am adverse to spending that. In fact, I'd prefer to use the energy to get Verizon to address it.
And they've agreed they will, but they're just going to use copper lines. They won't use a fiber, which is why Tom LaFlame and others are proposing to do it ourselves. So Verizon has said, we will replace the line. They've got a proposal, but we're going to use copper.
And I'm sorry if this part of the discussion I missed. If they use copper and fix the line, will that address the dead spot problem?
Yes.
Yes.
That spot has to do with radio, it's got nothing to do with
Yeah, I am so far out of my league when we're talking about fiber, and I don't profess to have grasped 75% of what you said, Mr. Litt, and that's not an indictment on you.
So I'll try.
The premise I have is that if Verizon has promised to replace the copper line, and that replacement is going to address the problems, then why would we as a town spend $30,000 just to get fiber?
I haven't seen the proposal, it's hard for me to say, but just in terms of the technical answer for the pieces, the radio repeater is you have police and fire running around town, and they want to talk to an antenna, you know, up on Main Street today. The radios in the cars can't get there because there are hills in the way. So the repeater is another radio that's put up someplace high, and there are two of them in town. And you can see the radios in the cars and the trucks can see that. But the question then becomes, so he can see it, now how do you get what the radio hears back to Main Street? And the answer is over a telephone line today. And that telephone line has been leased from Verizon and has problems in the rain. It just hasn't been maintained. Now,
I appreciate your effort to try to clarify my lack of understanding, but I still don't know the answer to whether or not the new copper line that Verizon agrees that they have the responsibility to install is going to address the
So
problem.
two issues have been raised. One issue has been that this copper line has not been maintained, and so the two radio information can't go between the two radios. Another issue has been hinted at, but I have not heard details, where people are saying, yeah, and anyway, the radios up on these repeater sites are old and need to be replaced at some point. But I don't know what the detailed state is, and that may be the $70,000 that
So
you're
it
seeing at
sounds
the
like we
bottom.
don't know what the issue, whether it's being caused by a combination of a, chewed-on copper line and receivers being owed, or it's a receiver problem and not a copper line problem, or it's a copper line problem. We just don't know.
So Kathy, who knows this? Tom McLean?
Tom, no, Tom tells you this is not his area, so he doesn't.
So who's the expert in it? I feel like we're kind of debating this amongst ourselves, and none of us are experts in
Mr.
this.
Purple's going to help a little bit, but the only person I haven't talked to is Chief Morrow, so maybe he's got it all.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
so I would suggest that if you want to have a conversation like this, that we have the people in the room that can answer the questions rather than just throwing out what-ifs. Unfortunately, Mr. LaFlame is actually watching the meeting this evening, and he sent me a text and said that the issue is not that Verizon does not address the lines and maintain the lines, it's just that the line isn't very reliable and seems to need to continue to be replaced, which I think Mr. Litt, alluded to. But to prolong this without the people in the room is just kind of throwing things against the wall and see what
I
sticks.
think we agree with you. We're just going to,
Okay.
we're going to punt this one until we can get more information.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Everybody agree that we haven't decided on this one? This is still up in the air? Okay. All right, the next one, which is the big one, is the proposed corrections that will help the water problem at the library. We initially thought the 450 was the tanks that have been proposed. It's a lot more than the tanks. So Mr. Purple has an update for us as far as where that stands right now.
So again, information that I received from Mr. Parent late this afternoon. He's continued having conversations with the engineer as to alternatives to a $450,000 tank, tank at the library to try and hold the water until it can be placed into the stormwater system. They've identified 4 items that would address this issue. The first item is improvements to the outlets of 4 basement sump pumps. Second is the improvements to the window well on the west side of the building. The third is the removal of some of the old well piping that exists on the property. Those 3 items, to address those 3 items, would be $100,000, and that carries some contingency inside of it, probably $20,000 to $25,000 of contingency. The 4th item is mitigating the on-site stormwater system connection at Main Street, which would be the holding tank that had been discussed. The number on that is still about $450,000. There is a piece in the report that, again, I do not have a copy of yet, but it states that as an alternative to item 4, it's our understanding the town DPW may elect to conduct a storm drain capacity upgrade, assuming the upgrade occurs on Main Street, at least down to the northwest corner of Albert S. Woodward School. This would be advantageous to the library, have the potential to eliminate the need for the tank installation. So, again, this is something.
Can you read that sentence again, please?
Sure. As an alternative to item 4, it is our understanding, that being the engineer, that the town, DPW, may elect to conduct a storm drain capacity upgrade. So they've had an understanding of the Main Street project and the fact that there is going to be, a significantly larger pipe that is being placed in the street. Assuming that the upgrade occurs on Main Street and at least down to the northwest corner of the Albert S. Woodward School, this would be advantageous to the library and could have the potential to eliminate the need for the stormwater tank installation.
And who is that from? Who are you reading from?
This is an email from John Parent that I believe he cut and pasted from what he got from the engineer.
This is the latest response from the engineer?
Yes, this just came this evening.
Claire?
I'm no engineer, but I did read the report that you sent out from, the engineer is Weston and Sampson. And to reiterate what Mark said is absolutely correct. There are several different recommendations in here, and again, I'm no engineer, but some of these things are common sense. Number one, remove the gravel from the window well. It's kind of like cleaning stuff out. Just to cut to the whole thing, there's a list of, you could call them maintenance issues here that have not been done at the library. There's grading issues which should be addressed. When they say grade the pavement away from the library, that's the way water travels. So I just could not vote for spending a dime on this until somebody looks at this report, and and I think you said, Mark, and if I put this wrong, to work with the engineers, which was a question that was brought up before with the VHB people. And let's make sure that everybody's on the right page and they're addressing the issues that are put in this report.
Question. Okay. Hey, Mark, the first 3 items, the sump pump work, the window well work, and the removal of the well piping, you indicated that would cost approximately $100,000 plus a 25% contingency fee.
That
Correct?
100,000 includes a contingency, John.
That includes the contingency.
That does, yes.
And then you said that if the DPW superintendent may elect, why is that conditional? Why wouldn't we have the DPW superintendent conduct that stormwater drain report upgrade?
I think that was couching the issue that is already intended to be done as part of the Main Street project.
Okay.
So that work is already included in that.
So is there an option in your mind or in the Board of Selectmen's mind that we go forward with that $100,000 repair and then with the Main Street reconstruction project, have the DPW superintendent do that upgrade to the stormwater design to see if we can obviate the need for the $450,000 tanks, because the new roadway design will address that problem. I mean, obviously, there's risks involved, but,
Sure.
I mean, it seems like that is a reasonable risk based upon what.
Well, I
that
think,
report-
right, I think what you're saying is somewhere, between, Claire and you can still spend the 450 at some point to put in a holding tank. If the engineer is looking at this, and again, there is no certainty on this issue, and I
Right.
think we've talked about this before, there is no silver bullet, there is no guarantee. If rain is coming down at 2 to 3 inches an hour, there isn't a whole lot we're gonna be able to do about it. However, for the majority of those storms outside of that 100-year storm, the ability with these 3 fixes and the work that's going to be done in the street and increasing that pipe size by more than double to handle the storm water, it's going to keep the water out of the parking lot of the library, which is going to significantly reduce the likelihood that there would be flooding in that building. So, again, I hire people, or we contract with people that are much smarter than me and know a lot of these things that I don't, and that's why we hire them. If they can tell me with a level of certainty that this is, more than just a good first step to try and correct this issue and alleviate the liability of us having to shut the library down for a period of time, lose programming, and really affect the service for the residents, then this may be money well spent. I would rather take $100,000 and look to address the issue, and then if it doesn't, we can look to take the next step, rather than spending $500,000 and then finding out, and not knowing whether or not something lesser would have worked.
My thought would be is that we take the $100,000 and we take the next step with regards to the DPW superintendent's upgrade to the stormwater design.
But that's already there, John.
Okay,
That's
it's
already
already
part,
there.
that's already part of Main Street project.
All right, so the May-elect is not,
So the May-elect is already,
okay.
is already, so.
So it sounds like though he wasn't convinced that the pipe was gonna run all the way down to Woodward, but it is,
Wanted to ensure that it would,
okay?
and
it is?
and my understanding is that it is. I haven't talked with Karen Galligan about this yet. So I just want her to verify, I want her to take a look at this and make sure that the things that, as John is saying, may elect are actually, yes, these things are in the project. I know that pipe is being increased. I know that that is happening, but I want to make sure that all of what they are saying is actually included as part of the project.
Down to
Kathy?
Woodward.
I talked to Karen last week about it after we had our meeting, and I had the impression that the changes to the Main Street plan were going to happen, that the pipe would be bigger. It doesn't sound like he's gotten the new report. I thought there was a whole new engineering report. If you're quoting the one that I sent to Kathy and she sent out, that's the old one. Did you get a new one?
He's got a new one. We
Is
just
this
don't
the
have
brand
it
new
yet.
one?
happened
This
today.
is, like
Today?
I said, I've just kind of gotten cut and paste items tonight from Mr. Parent
Yeah.
to at least let you know where we are and bring you up to date, on the issue. So there will be, and what I've asked for is that if there's anything that contradicts or that runs contrary to something that was in the original report, I want to make sure that there is we're not going to sit there and we're going to debate reports at town meetings. So I want to make sure that
I
it
think that what you read
supersedes.
was all in the original, those were all suggestions that were made originally.
Correct.
So,
And so remember, advisory approved a reserve fund transfer when we were at the Newland Children's Center to give him another, they needed $30,000 to finish this report. They got 15 at last year's, so we gave them another 18. So I assume that this is done now at this point, Mark, that the 33,000 is spent.
I'm sorry, say that
This
again?
report, so they're done with what they're gonna do. We just need to see it, but they're
I
done.
think they're just about done. I don't know that the new letter, the new report is fully complete, but we've been pushing them to get this information, knowing that we want to put everything out as correct as we can.
Right. Mr. Parent had said they needed 3 weeks. We said, go faster because we need the numbers. So this now quantifies those three things, and that's where the 100,000 is coming
I think
from.
we had the 100,000 before.
I don't, if we did, I didn't know we did.
I think I knew we did.
Okay. Then you knew, then you had some insight.
Yeah, on the inside.
Claire?
Okay, so there's the report from the engineers dated January 8th.
Right.
Okay, so either there's a subsequent report
There is.
to that with the figures,
That's what he's talking
okay?
about.
One of the things that we need, I would have a real big problem voting on something that is copy and pasted. We need to see the real report.
I don't disagree. I'm providing you the information to let you know that
Yeah,
this.
He just got it this afternoon, so he's
Right,
gone as
this
fast as he
option exists. I mean, the email is 5 o'clock, so, and I've been trying to get some other things done. I'm also taking minutes while I'm up here, too, so. Oh, please.
Sorry, excuse me.
Do you want me to leave?
No, no, that's
We're
fine.
doing minutes, don't worry. We've got somebody at home doing the minutes because.
Madam Chair, just so the committee is aware, when the board took a position this morning, this is all new information. We have 3 members here. We would like to bring this up for rediscussion at our next meeting on the position, just so you're aware that's where the board stands on this as of tonight. Thank you.
It sounds like we're going to do the same thing. We'll get the report and then we'll vote next Tuesday. Okay?
Unreasonable to request that the engineer who writes the report come to the meeting? Because I'm always concerned that the specific type questions I have, generally I try to ask a practical questions, are not going to be answered in the report. Is that possible?
Actually, I was just going to ask this, if you would be, the committee would be interested in coming to the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 5th. I think March 5th is our next meeting, and we can have these discussions as a group at that time, and everyone can get their questions answered.
So our next meeting is, we're meeting every Tuesday till we get this done, right? And of course, we're trying to get our recommendations into the written warrant. Mr. Purple said we have to the 19th to
19th.
get that done. So, well, he said 18th, and I said, can we at least have to, because we're going to be on the 19th, right? So I'm hoping that there's no difference between the 18th and 20th as far as when he really has to have it in. So we are running the risk that we'll, I mean, and this is a big number, so we can certainly meet with you on March 5th. We just will probably have to make our recommendation at town meeting instead of having it in the written warrant, which is okay. I'd rather do it right than, quick
Absolutely.
thing and not be happy with what we've done.
And I would
Lisa?
assume also from the board's position, I may be speaking out of turn, but, the board would have to make an amendment of some form at town meeting. Yes,
Lisa,
John, sorry.
would it be possible to have the actual author, the engineer, at your March 5th meeting?
That, I think, is the intent of the board
Okay.
sitting here tonight. Obviously, we'll have those discussions with Mr. Purple, and he will clue your chair in as well, and she can share that information as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is everyone happy with where we're going with this one? Okay, all right, so we're not going to vote anything on this one. Okay, next one. We were fine with the AC condenser, capital maintenance fund, which is the warrant article that we've had for many years that gives John Parent some money to fix the unexpected repairs that we always have year after year. Do you want me to keep going? You want?
If I can just, I'm sorry, just go back to the prior discussion. We're also, just so you're aware, we're going to ask that both department heads be there for the discussion as well. I just wanted to add that so everyone was clear. I'm sorry. Thank you.
DPW and
And facilities.
John Parent, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so this one, so I talked to John Parent several times about this one. He has updated me on where he stands today. Remember, this is a cumulative article, right? So 100 goes in every year and it stays open. And so right now, he's got, with everything he spent, about 65 left in it, with, 5 months to go. And he is fairly certain a big chunk of that's going to be spent, but he doesn't know on what because he's not sure what's going to break. Finn closed down a day, a couple weeks ago because of their heating system failed. So he doesn't know. We've got 3 really old buildings. So he's pretty certain that he's going to spend a big chunk of that. So we felt last week that we should not cut that normal $100,000 to 70 as the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen have approved. Since then, I've been told that possibly the Board of Selectmen have changed this to 100, but I'm not sure. It's not on what Brian sent to me. So can someone, either Lisa or Mark, let us know where?
did send that to her,
I got today,
right?
was my packet. So,
Yeah, see, I haven't seen this either. So the one I've got
Oh,
still
okay.
says 70 there, so I haven't seen the 100 there. But it looks like Board of Selectmen have agreed to up that to 100, but they're going to tell us that for sure.
Madam Chair, so I believe that Mr. Ballantyne sent out that revised budget to you, I think to Ms. Malinowski as vice chair, and then to the selectmen, noting that Assabet's assessment came in at $40,000 less. So our recommendation is that we would put that capital maintenance fund back to 100,000 from 70, so that, because I believe that was a 6-0 vote from your committee. And so the selectmen, I think, would agree with that as well. So,
I think, I may have missed it because in the description of what had changed, Brian didn't say that. He just told me about Assabet, so I didn't go back and look. So
no, that's
it may
fine.
be there.
We'll
So I
take him to
didn't see that
task
it-
later for that.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like Board of Selectmen agreed with us on the 100, and you guys do too. So we've already voted on this, right? So there's no reason to re-vote it. We voted for 100. Sounds like they agree, so we're all on the same page as far as that one goes. Okay, all right, so keep moving. Okay, so there's that one. I want to come back to the cruiser camera system in a second. Okay. Karen, Ms. Galligan has changed the numbers for the number 11, number 12, line 11, 12, to what she thinks are the right numbers, so we said fine to that. Okay, so the next one to discuss is the road maintenance fund. So you saw the email that I sent to Ms. Galligan and asked questions, right? And so she replied, but like everything, answers beget more questions. So I haven't had a chance to go back and ask the next round of questions. So I'm not sure I know any more now than I knew this morning when I asked those questions. So it's very confusing what she really needs. That's all I can say. She's got Chapter 70 money coming in that she says is totally devoted to the Main Street project. So if that's the case, it doesn't sound like she's got much money to do anything else other than what we're going to approve here. But again, it's hard. I think she's saying, whatever you give me, I'm going to spend, is if I want to paraphrase what she's saying. That it's not that I've budgeted this or I know what I'm going to do. It's whatever I get. I've definitely got projects I can do. So I will do whatever I've got money to do with, and I will not run out of projects. So the warrant article, and again, this is a year-after-year warrant article, it's a standing warrant article, was 400 in the fiscal year 19, but it was 250 the 3 years prior to that. So I misstated that when we met last week. Mr. Purple was right. So it was 250 for 3 years, and then we did 400 last year. So we voted last week to increase that back to 400 because we felt like that was the right number. So I can't sit here and say 400 is right. I can't say 284 is right. I don't know what the right number is as far as giving her what she needs to really do what we want her to do here. So that's where we are right now. If anybody else wants to add to that as far as what we think that we should do with this.
So is Karen going to be limited in what she can do because of what's coming up with Main Street for next year?
Possibly.
So
What we could do, if we wanted to, since we're going to hear from her on March 5th, she's going to be at that meeting, we could wait till then and try, with her in front of her, we can go back and forth and try to see if we can't hammer out this number a little bit better than it is now. So, Mr. Purple, can you, or Ms. Brascio, the 284, I think, is also just, arbitrary may not be the right word, but it's not a number that's based on a spreadsheet where we came up with it. I think it's, it was 250 before and maybe raise it a little bit. So I don't think that number means a lot either. The 400 doesn't mean a lot either. So I don't know what the better number is at this point.
I think we just took a straw poll here that we'll also discuss this. It's up for rediscussion at the meeting on the 5th. I mean, we'll have more time to get additional information as well.
Okay. Anybody have a problem with waiting till the 5th to talk to Karen on that one too and see if we can really pin down what she needs for the next 2 years? Okay, so there's that one.
I think, just one quick thing. I think that just for her preparation for that meeting, only because I've been involved with the Main Street thing and the money specifically, she's gone through the history of putting together and setting aside the money for the downtown part, which is what I call the Chapter 90 money. I think she really needs to be prepared to explain how much money she has in there, and then how much of this money, because there's already a whole pool there. I'm not saying it's enough or anything, but there's just a whole pool of money that's been put aside over several years. It started way back when. And then how much of this is gonna go for the downtown?
So would anyone be willing to try to sit down with Karen, face to face, and try to get a better understanding of where she's coming from, so we really understand what she really needs and what she's planning on doing, and how she maintains the roads other than Main Street? I mean, we can't just do Main Street, you've got to keep doing other roads too. I mean, if I read what she said to me, she can't possibly mean what I concluded, which is that the only money she's going to have for the non-Main Street project is going to be what's in this warrant article. That's what it sounds like with this reply, but that can't be true. That doesn't give her enough money to do anything. So that's why I think if one of us could spend some time with her before March 5th and try to really understand what she's saying as far as what she needs, what her plans are. She said, don't forget, I've got other projects. I've got sidewalks, I've got to fill cracks, I've got to do potholes. It's not just repaving roads. I've got lots of other things I've got to have some money for too. I think it would probably help that meeting that night if we could help her think through this, in a way that's coherent so that we really can understand what she's trying to tell us.
And also, if I may just add that the 284 number, the board supported that number this morning. I just wanted to add that, and we will be relooking at it at the meeting on the 5th. But just so you're aware that the board did support the 284 this morning. Thank you.
I can sit down with her.
Okay, all right. I think that's the only way to really, this back and forth with email. One email just begets more questions,
Sure.
So I thought I had all the questions out there. If she could answer those, I could get it, and it didn't. It's raised more questions. So, okay. All right, let's do the last one, which is and we'll go back to the small things. So the calendar field, $15,000. You may recall when rec came in front of us, we didn't talk about that one. We spent most of the time talking about the $120,000 they wanted for the choke field study, right? So we didn't really talk about this one. So this one, of course, caused a lot of controversy and discussion at last year's town meeting. It did not get approved. It was a much bigger number because I think they were trying to not only decide what the problem was, they were trying to design the fix, right? So this is just, it's my understanding, just to pay someone to decide what needs to be done on the field itself, and no more. Not to say how to fix it, not to say what the cost of fixing is, but just to say this is what you need to do to fix the field. So the open space land's not involved, Carriage Hill's not involved. They're just trying to say, if you want to fix the water problem on your field, this is what you gotta do. Did Ms. Brascio leave? Okay. Is she over there? I just can't see her. Where is she? She's hiding. So Ms. Brascio might have met with the chair of rec since we talked last.
Actually, unfortunately, the discussion did not happen, but I did speak to Mr. Purple regarding when this item came up and the discussions they had, so I think for now it's best that he can touch on that for you as far as what the 15 entails. Do you want to do that or do you want me to do it?
Just creates more minutes for me. So essentially, the Calander Field, if you recall, last time this came before town meeting, it was kind of an omnibus engineering, design, construction article. And this has been stripped back to $15,000 simply for the engineering and the study of what it is that is the issue on town property, affecting the field, affecting the drainage, and then determining what that solution would be that town meeting is going to be asked to consider to make the field more playable and to allow water to better drain on the field. So that is the intent of the $15,000.
I mean, it sounds like this is the first step, right, to kind of untangle the whole Calander thing. So, sounds like if we ever want to figure out what the problem is, this is a necessary step.
I'm somewhat gun-shy, only insofar as I don't really understand the problem. Is there a written proposal that supports this $15,000 number so that I understand what the scope of the study is?
It's my understanding, yes, but I haven't seen it.
So I would suggest if we're going to, again, people should be in the room that have the expertise
Right.
to have have the discussion. So I would suggest that either Recreation and/or Ms. Galligan, who has been helping Recreation to engage the right consultants for some of this stuff, to provide that information. She can probably provide that information to you.
And I, I think we should take responsibility. Rec was before us, and we didn't ask any questions about this, so we had an opportunity, and
We did.
we
We
did?
did. We asked if it was going to be, if this was going to be part of town meeting, and they said that they were not sure yet.
Oh, okay.
So, and,
Which is why
So-
we didn't focus on it so much.
right.
Okay, so we could do a couple things. We could also ask Kristen to come to the March 5th meeting and talk, because Ms. Gallagher's going to be there, so we can use her for, 3 things now, and do it then. We could support it tonight. We could not support it tonight. We could ask for the actual, whatever they've got in writing to say it's $15,000. We could look at that, between now and next week, and then vote next week. Remember that, we've approved, we're going to vote tonight on the actual town budget, the operational budget. So that we can say, we voted on. This is a warrant article, right? So it's separate. So we're not doing anything to be able to at least opine on the budget itself. So this is a separate warrant article, right? So,
If I can maybe even offer a suggestion, is the board supported the 15 at their meeting today based on the information as Mr. Purple has shared it. It might be helpful for advisory if maybe they can attend your next meeting. So when we meet on the 5th, it's just one less thing that we all have to take care of, seeing as the board has already supported this.
yeah, so that's one word. So we can get her here hopefully next Tuesday, and knock that one off, maybe.
Thank you.
Claire?
Yeah, I agree with what John said, because it just seems like we do a whole lot of studies. And one of the things that I don't see us, and maybe it's happening, I don't see, and it's not faulting anybody, but it needs to kind of be a little bit of, I think, of a different mindset, that before you even engage an engineer, of course they're going to come in and do a study. It's kind of like we have some very good resources here, some very smart people. Could kind of, first of all, tap them and say, are we throwing money out the window even looking at this particular site? And I'm not just saying the field, but just kind of in general. There were so many issues that were brought up with that field the last time around that I think unless those issues, we don't need a consultant to tell us what the issues were. We can just do the replay of last year's town meeting. That's just the way I look at it. I think that we need to kind of see how we can draw on some of the resources that we have here in town to give us kind of like a, high-level opinion.
Claire, I think that was part of the problem last town meeting, is we had a bunch of people who were not experts debating what the problem was. So I think this actually gets to an objective look at what the actual problem is versus a multitude of people guessing at what the problem is and getting nowhere. And that's what happened last year.
Well, there has to be somebody in town who has, who is a little bit more, maybe not an expert, but who is a little bit more than, I agree, you have a lot of people kicking around opinions, but you have people who do this for a living.
Yeah, but they had an expert there last year. They had who they'd hired, and then Ms. Jasinski had gone and talked to someone, and so she had that kind of informal opinion. So there was just a lot of clutter at the town meeting. So I do think this year, whatever we go forward with, we need to make it really clear, so that it's clear, right? So that the town knows what to do here. So why don't we ask her to come next Tuesday? We'll try to get all the information she's got ahead of time so we can read it, and then we'll talk about it further. Okay. Chelsea? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, now let's go to budget capital. Okay, so we've agreed with the new roof, we didn't have an issue with that one. Let's start with the 2 police cars. So on that one, we agreed that we need 2 police cars, that's not the issue. We were going to try to encourage the Board of Selectmen to go to the schools and see if the schools would pay for those. So since then, I've met with Ms. Braccio, we had a really good meeting this week, and we both agreed that maybe the better path to discuss with each of our various boards and committees is to not keep one-shotting this. Instead, don't necessarily ask for this right now because it's going to be hard to get done. There's a time issue. But instead, let's, with a more concerted approach, go back to the schools based on everything that was done in 2010, update that report, which is being updated as we speak. The numbers are being updated. And then make a case for a long-term plan with each school that will involve a lot more money than a police car every other year. So Ms. Braccio, she couldn't speak for the Board of Selectmen, but she's on board with this personally, and she is absolutely intending to bring it in front of the entire board to get their buy-in for a stated process to go forward to really try to get an agreement that really will end up with some significant more money than what we've had in the past. So rather than go now and say, do this, and then come back, a month later and say, oh, by the way, we want this. Don't do that, eat this year, pay for it, and then try to get a longer-term plan that really involves meaningful money from each school.
So we're gonna pick up this 97,528.
Well, that's
That's what you're suggesting.
That's what we would do if we don't get
Right.
the schools to pay for it. There's not enough money in the revolving fund from the Harvard Primate Center to do this, so I looked at that, so we can't do it there. So there doesn't seem to be any in the pocket to go to other than schools. But I'm looking at Mr. Rooney because this is his area.
Yeah, I mean, we made the effort in 2010, and I think we gained a lot of intelligence and insight as to what the nonprofit's approach to these contributions are. And perhaps it would be better for me or maybe a subset of us to talk with the selectmen about a future approach rather than just refreshing the report and going back again. I think their mindset is such that they're more inclined to contribute individual capital items on an as-needed / requested basis rather than locking themselves in. I'm pretty sure that the majority, if not the unanimous position of their boards of trustees are they are not going to sign up for a specific pilot program. Now, maybe in the last 9 years that has changed. I suspect it may not have, but there are different ways to approach it, whether you refresh the 2010 report or you go on a annual or biannual basis to request capital needs, which they, at least historically, have been more receptive to. So that's kind of where my thoughts are on that.
Ms. Braccio?
Thank you. And I just would like to add that the report is being refreshed, Mr. Rooney, and I think that's a great starting point for the board to see. I will tell you, it was very eye-opening for me, because obviously I wasn't on the board then. I thought there was tremendous value in that report, and that's why I think having it updated, and it is in the process of being done now, and then actually being able to bring it to the board. Again, I can't speak for the board. I can certainly speak for myself that I think it's something that certainly needs to be revisited. And how we get there, obviously, you're a great resource as well as advisory, and I think this is a great thing to have discussions on going forward. But my intent is, as Ms. Cook said, my intent is to bring this to the board.
Somewhat on a related matter, has the board taken a position on that warrant article that relates to the pilot programs?
I was not at the meeting this morning. My understanding is the positions were 3-1 from the board. Is that correct, Mr. Purple? Correct. 3-1 to not support.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
to not support the citizens' position. Have you read the, we're going to talk about all those next week. So there's a warrant article.
I hate to sound like the person that's always bringing issues up, but one of the things Mr. Rooney said is, okay, so there was this report that was done. This was 10 years ago, and we're now, in the beginning of 2019, so we're 9 years away. If I understood what he said, that it seems like there's an appetite for them to provide contributions for a specific thing. So in other words, you could have the St. Mark's Cruiser, and you could have the Faith School Cruiser, and you could have, whatever. If it seems like there's an appetite for that, why are we going to wait to put together a plan? I mean, that's almost $50,000 that they're giving for the year. That's a pretty good start, I think, for a pilot program.
I think the importance of the report is that it provides the data, the background for the discussions with the nonprofits. When they realize the amount of services that the town provides to their students, to their faculty, to their administration, when they realize the amount of money that the town does not collect because of the tax-exempt properties, and they realize the number of students that our town educates that are their, family members, that data, that information provides solid basis for asking for those capital items. So there is value in refreshing the report, but in terms of getting a lump sum commitment from them on a year-to-year basis, if you can do it, that would be Herculean. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do think the report provides the basis, so there is value for the report.
So is it unrealistic, given time, whatever, is it unrealistic to do some type of a quick update on that report in order to be able to present it to them, to the nonprofits, in the short period of time that we have?
So just to make sure we've got the facts, so they're making small payments right now, so Faye is giving us $10,000. That was.
For the ladder truck?
Yeah, and then I think, Mr. Propel, correct me if I'm wrong, that this year St. Mark's has given us a check for $35,000.
And is 10 of that for the ladder truck, which was a previous commitment?
I don't know that. I don't know, but it's 35. So they're giving, it's small. So my concern is that if we go now and ask Ms. Braccio, or some portion of Board of Selectmen, and maybe Mr. Rooney, go and ask for police cars, that we're cannibalizing our effort to get the long-term plan in place. So I'm a little bit more optimistic, because I think things have changed in 10 years. I think there's more pressure on the not-for-profits to contribute more, and you've got a whole new Board of Trustees at this point than what you had before. So to me, it's the composition of that Board of Trustees that's going to determine this. It's not John Warren or the CFO there. It's that Finance Committee that's part of the Board of Trustees, and they're going to be different people than they were before. So, maybe I'm naive, but I'm just hoping that, there's just a lot of data that I think can be thrown at them that's new. Their finances are much healthier now than they were 2010. So I pulled the 990s and looked at their balance sheets, so much healthier. So I'm hoping with that, with, fresh pairs of ears to listen to it, and with the way that you can convince anybody to do a lot of things, and Ms. Braccio, that we really have a chance to get it maybe it's 5 years. I don't think, maybe they won't do 10, but 5 year, yeah, we'll give you something that looks like what we use, But I don't know,
I'm not convinced, but that's okay.
So the question on the table tonight is, do we want to continue to ask the Board of Selectmen to go now and provide the money to pay for the police cars? That's what we got to decide tonight. That longer term discussion is not going to happen in the next week or so. But do we want to? Because if we're going to ask her to go, she's going to have to go pretty quick, because they're in the middle of their budget discussions too, and they need to finalize their budget. And this is not in their budget right now. So do we want to ask the Board of Selectmen, like we decided last week, to go ahead and for the current year, fiscal year 20, pay for these student police cars?
I'm uncomfortable in doing that, only insofar as that, to me, is more of a policy decision that the Board of Selectmen should be making. I don't think we should be making that and saying to the board, go talk to St. Mark's and try to get cruisers for next fiscal year.
Oh, I agree. So we've done this many times. We have no authority. We can ask. It's just a request. We would recommend that you do this. That's all we can do is we can recommend, and they can say yes, they can say no, they don't agree. So whatever we do is not binding on them for sure.
Yeah,
So the question is, do we want to continue to ask them to do this, and then they can decide what they think they should do?
I mean, to the extent that we have any influence over them, my suggestion would be is to wait for the report to be updated so that they can put their best foot forward in the ask. And, you know, we shouldn't forget that they have been willing to contribute in the past when asked and when convinced. So my suggestion is we wait to have all of our ducks lined up before we start having the discussion with them, rather than running to them in the next week or two saying, listen, would you donate a cruiser for fiscal year 20, and we'll get back to you with the updated service information thereafter. That's my opinion. I would just go forward with the funding as identified behind you.
Chief Paulus made a really convincing case they need to, so let me just say that, for those, you were there, I don't remember if you were there. So Chelsea was there, Brad, I can't remember if you were there the night Chief Paulus was in front of the Board of Selectmen. I mean, they definitely need two, so I don't think there's any question of that. It's not one, it's two. But, so what could happen is that after town meeting, if there's a conversation with the schools, and this is all they can get, then we could still, one of the articles at town meeting is to basically accept anything they give us, so we could still accept the money for those cruisers, and you just end up with more free cash. So this way, we know, if we vote for this, we know they're gonna get the cruisers one way or another. If the longer-term plan doesn't work, and instead they say that they're happy to do the cruisers instead, that's the way they get out of that, then we can still accept it, because we've got a warrant article that says we can accept anything that the schools give us. So you can still accept that money even after town meeting. Right?
Is it unreasonable to, in the short term, I'm sure Brian could provide the figures that, in terms of what they have actually given over the last, say, 5 years or whatever period that you pick to say what they have, and to go to them. And I would make a motion to ask the selectmen to consider going to them and saying, we're looking at this, and we know that you've given whatever you've given over the last few years, but we would really like to have you, and we think you would like to help with the cruisers. And like I said, even if it isn't a whole cruiser, if you knock that amount down by a half.
So you're not saying what Mr. Mooney's saying, you're saying something different. He's saying, wait, let's get this report totally up to date, let's add things to it that have happened in the last 10 years, let's get a really good report that we can show them, and then sit down with them. So that's what he's saying. You're
Right.
saying,
I'm
don't wait
saying-
for that.
Right.
Okay?
I mean, I think his idea is great. I just think that in the scheme of things, if you do put together a report, then you can also include in there, we understand that for our budgeting year for 2020, you gave us, and include that in the report.
Yeah, but again, we aren't doing anything. All we can do is suggest to the
Right.
board of selectmen, we
So I
think you
guess
should
my
do this.
motion will be, probably lose, but that's okay. I will make the motion to ask the selectmen to go ahead and talk to go ahead and talk to the schools about contributing to one or more of the cruisers for this year.
And not mention anything else. That we're
And
going
not
to come
mention-
back to you with an updated report and ask you for more money, so not even talk about that.
No, I think right now, like you said, you want to put together the whole report and everything, and that's nice. But this is kind of, let's just kind of get it going to set the expectation that something's coming down the road.
Yeah, just so you know, they watch these meetings too, so, to the extent that we're gonna try to tell them that, something that's not gonna come to reality, they'll know that in advance.
And I think that,
And just clear, if I can also add, the headmasters cannot make this decision themselves, so they need to go to their Board of Trustees, and they meet generally once a month. So in terms of, the compression of time is significant. So that's just another thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And remember too, we've got to address the warrant article that is gonna be voted on at town meeting that talks about this too. So we'll talk about that next week as far as our position. Board of Selectmen have voted, not to support it, 3-1 or 1-3. So we've gotta talk about that too as part of this whole discussion. But I still think it's short-sighted to, not sit down and have a comprehensive meeting with them, with updated numbers, with whatever's different in the last 10 years, and really try to hammer out a long-term deal. I really think that doing what you're suggesting does cannibalize that effort.
Well, I apologize, you made a motion, and then I started
Yeah, well,
talking, and no one seconded.
Yeah,
so
that's
I
okay,
apologize.
nobody seconded, so I might as
Well,
well
go-
just
hold on.
withdraw
Okay,
it,
so
because I
can
think it's
someone second
DOA
Claire's motion?
anyway.
Someone second Claire's motion? Okay, and then we'll continue discussing. So, the discussion we just had is part of that discussion. So, Judy?
What do you want to vote? Is that what
So
you're
Claire's
asking?
made a motion to ask the Board of Selectmen to,
Oh, I think John is right. We need to have a comprehensive plan first. The data.
Chelsea?
I agree with John's approach, and mostly because I think that there's too much, I think we need these cruisers, and so I don't think we should mess with taking it out, putting it back in, and having some uncertainty. I think if we're in favor of the cruisers, given the timeline that we're at, I think we should just stick with it being in here.
I support having the full report and evidence before having such a meeting, and looking at it as a long-term thing, right? Not just trying to get a couple bucks here and there to solve a quick problem under the gun of a very short period of time. And you said we could also, they could give us money later in the year if they wanted towards the cruisers, right? It doesn't have to be before town meeting. So I'd rather have the report and have it done the right way.
Okay, so we've got a motion, we've got a second. So all in favor of Claire's motion to ask the Board of Selectmen to go now, to ask them to pay for the 2 cruisers, in favor? So 1. All opposed to that motion to go now? 5. So 1 to 5. Okay. Okay, so just to reiterate, I think someone should make a motion to support the 97,528 on the warrant article for this, so we've officially voted on it.
I move to support the $97,528 for the 2 police cruisers.
All in favor? So 6-0.
Abstain.
You abstain? Because you have to?
Yeah.
Okay, so 5-0-1. Okay. So, now, the one thing that Mr. Purple, I mean, he did a great job listing the differences, but the 98-92 was no different than that 3,500 on the article that Chief Paulus wants. So can we go back to FY20 articles?
Kathy, can you say that again? I didn't hear what you said.
So see the 3555, I mean, this is,
Yeah.
small money, the cruiser camera system. Now go back to
That
budget
has already
capital.
been voted and.
Well, we didn't vote on that, and that was one we were holding to, just like we were the 98-92.
Yeah.
With the hope that, or with the, hope that we could use the primate fund revolving funds, which are dedicated solely to fire and police,
Right.
to fund that. So it's still up in the air whether there's money to do it. I talked to Chief Paulus, and he said, fine, if there's money. He told me there's nothing else he's got obligated to then. But then Mr. Purple thinks that some of that money's been obligated to fund the infrastructure improvements at Overlook Drive. So it's still up in the air. I think there's money, so if we could wait to vote on that one next week, I can do the spreadsheet to show what I think is gonna be in this. So I think there's money to do that, using the revolving funds that the police have. Only the police can use those revolving funds in the fire, and I think there's enough money to easily pick up those 2 things. All right, so if we can just hold that till next week, I'll do the spreadsheet and make sure that I've got the numbers right. I'll check with Mr. Purple and Chief Paulus. Okay?
Okay. To avoid further discourse on this, would it make sense for the board, this board, to vote yea or nay on the expense? And then the issue would be the funding. I mean, I
yes.
assume that
Yeah.
there, again, maybe it's an incorrect assumption, but I assume that the police chief has made a persuasive position with regards to the need for these. And the question is the funding mechanism.
Everybody okay with that? Okay. So can someone make a motion to approve these two, and then we'll talk about potentially funding them a different way next week? Okay?
So I move to approve the police tasers and the radio. Is it a radio? Sorry, the camera system.
Camera and
The camera
tasers.
system. The camera and the tasers.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor?
So the motion's to strike the camera?
No, keep it.
Keep it.
So we're putting it back in, so we're with Board of Selectmen on these two. So we'll put that back in. And the tasers, I think, yeah, so he puts that back in. Okay, so we're with Board of Selectmen on that one. Okay, so unless I've missed one, I think we now have an agreement with the Board of Selectmen on,
Did you vote on that? You didn't vote on that.
well, we're not voting on the roof in the library tonight, we're gonna wait until March. Yeah, so that's March 5th. Okay, so what do you think we haven't voted on?
You didn't vote on the amount. You made the motion.
Okay, so,
Okay, Chelsea made the motion.
okay, so can you make the motion, put the amounts in the motion?
Oh, sure. Okay, so I move to approve the tasers for $9,892 and the cruiser camera system for $3,555.
Okay. All in favor?
Do we need another second or no?
Okay. Judy seconds the motion, the revised
Second
motion has
one.
numbers in it. Okay, all in favor?
second one?
All in favor? So 501. You want to discuss this one? Okay, sorry.
Can't we split that? Why are we doing it, is there a reason we're doing it together? Did I miss something?
Well, they're kind of related. They're the equipment that the police chiefs want. So we can do it separately. Are you going to vote differently?
Yeah, I was going to support one and not the other.
Okay, so we'll split it then.
So,
All right, so can you revise your motion? and
yes,
list them one
I
at a
will
time?
revise my motion. So I'm making a motion to approve the cruiser camera system for $3,555.
So all in favor? Okay,
Okay.
501.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the police tasers for $9,892.
Second. Discussion? Claire?
I didn't see the presentation, so I don't really have anything to discuss.
So are you going to vote against it or abstain?
I'm going to vote against it.
Just because you don't know enough about the tasers?
I thought they already had them.
They do have some. This is the first year we've.
Madam Chair, again, this is having discussions without the people in the room to answer the question. This is a program that has been in place for several years. It's a 5-year program. We pay the same amount every year for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, the units are all replaced with brand-new units, and it's gone along like that. This is not a new item. This has been a reoccurring item every year for the past 3 years.
Oh, okay, so if that was ever discussed in a meeting, I wasn't here. That's the first I heard of that.
It was probably discussed when the police chief came in front of the advisory committee in the fall to discuss his budget. I wasn't at that meeting either. So
Okay.
anyone else, given Mr. Purple's explanation, want to discuss this one further? You want more?
No, I'll vote for it. If that's what the plan is, now that I know, I'll vote for it.
All in favor? So 501. Okay, so I think that we've gone through everything where we had a difference with the Board of Selectmen. If I'm wrong, let me know. So we have basically agreed on everything other than on March 5th, we're going to revisit the tank issue, the water issue at the library. We're going to revisit the annual road maintenance issue, okay? We're going to talk to, hopefully, Ms. Laval next week about the $15,000 for the rec article. Okay?
The only item that I don't think that we've talked about, unless I missed it, was the stipend. for the,
Green.
the green.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we wanted to talk about that or
So you want
not.
to give everybody some background?
Yeah, I'm probably not as versed in what the program is, but this was one of the items that the Board of Selectmen discussed at length. And it's an additional stipend to write a grant that it sounds like we have to do yearly now that we're part of this green energy program. And the discussion that the Board of Selectmen had was related to, is it in a job description? Isn't it in a job description? Are we going outside of kind of what your normal call of duty is for your job responsibilities? And kind of what is the right amount of a stipend that you would give for writing such a grant? And is there anyone available as part of their regular salary job to write this grant? And feel free to, I kind of just paraphrase what your discussion was, that was probably much longer than that, but feel free to jump in if you have.
Where does it fall in the budget?
That's what I was actually just looking for, because it's
In the SAP.
in the facility.
So it's in the facilities budget?
Okay, I wasn't sure where it was.
And the selectman's position was what?
So they accepted it, and I think it was less than what the original, or did you go with the 65? Was it 65?
75.
I opposed it.
Okay.
The number that was agreed upon was 6,000. It started, I think it started at 7,500,
Okay.
down to 4,800, ended at 6.
And I know it's not a lot of money, but I just wanted to bring it up, because I don't want to, I think that accepting it is kind of going in, it's opening up other areas from saying, well, if I write a stipend, if I write a grant, do I get a stipend? And is there anybody else available that has excess capacity that could write this type of grant? I mean, I know a lot of the other departments have to write grants, so I just think it's setting the wrong precedent.
If we were to take a position on this, where do we take the position in the warrant? Is there,
SAP.
I'm sorry?
It's in the SAP plan.
It's in the SAP. Okay. And Ms. Faniff, I assume that you're the one, you voted against it? Can I just hear your rationale? I mean,
First, I want to make note that there's only two of us here this evening. We adjourned earlier, so I'm speaking for myself on this. What I said that evening, it was nothing that the department head hadn't already heard, because I had spoke with the individual. I'm concerned that anyone that goes above and beyond what's in their job description would have a high expectation that those extra duties would warrant a stipend. I suggested that the job description be looked at to address the additional level of responsibility, instead of just adding stipends and facing a potential that that's how we're going to address everything, instead of really looking at job descriptions.
and while you're there, can I ask a question? Is this grant, is it an extraordinary grant that's going to take an extraordinary amount of time? Or is it a typical type of grant that other employees currently do now in their regular job capacity? Do you know?
Well, it's not the amount of money that the town received over a 2-year period was substantial. I'm not making light of that.
Yeah.
But will the sum of, will the funds be consistent? Is this stipend prorated based on value? I don't have that. I don't know how it was determined that, $6,000 other than a vote of the selectmen, that's the appropriate sum. Moving forward, what would be the expectation to acquire that $6,000 or to be paid that $6,000?
Mark, do you know, is this an extraordinary effort in terms of this type of grant, such that an additional stipend could be segregated and not precedent-setting for other grants that are being written by other town employees?
So I think it's an interesting discussion, question, John. First of all, the money that is going to be funding this stipend is coming from administrative funds from the grants. Okay, so it's not going to be something that's going to be impacting the taxpayers. there was discussion by the Board of Selectmen as to whether or not, this should be, as Mrs. Faniff alluded to, prorated. You get so much in grants, you then get this amount and everything, and I think the argument to that point is the same level of work and effort is gonna go in whether you get it or whether you don't. We are at the point now that it's $250,000 a year, competitive grant cycle. This requires a certain amount of coordination with the utility companies, coordination with state officials, coordination with the energy services company to try and put together the capital projects to be able to use the funds to perform the work, to reduce the energy usage, to meet our 5-year goals. There's a lot of moving pieces. It isn't simply just the grant piece. As Mrs. Faniff also alluded to, we've been very successful, and received, the full $250 the first year. The money that was received when we became a green community, just shy, total all-in of, just under $400,000. I think there is a value to the work. Mr. Kalenda kind of talked about it at the meeting. When you get these status, we've become a green community, you've accepted this designation, you've met this goal, what are the strings? What are the things that you're going to be required to do that you may not know when you've gotten this designation? And we got into that discussion a little bit, and that was part of this deliberation. And, there is a certain level of work, that needs to go in to get these things done. The green community status requires you to reduce your energy usage by 15% over a 5-year period, okay? And I forget, it's 15 or 20% over a 5-year period. This may be, we don't know what the next phase of green community is once we meet that goal. That is really the big goal. There's some ongoing things, but that is the big piece. That is really where the work is associated. Is this stipend a short-term item? Is this, is after that, is it going to become fairly routine? The board has also, I think it was to Ms. Malinowski's point, the board has also said, we want the job description reviewed for facilities. We want to take a look at this. We'd like to put these items into the job description and look at doing that as well moving forward. So yeah, it's a long-winded answer to your question. I apologize if I've gotten a little off topic.
One more
for you.
question.
Sure.
There used to be a green committee, technology committee.
Yes.
I was on that, and
Yes.
it's no longer staffed by volunteers.
Correct.
If that committee was still in existence, would this be the type of function or activity that the volunteers would undertake, or would it still be, in your mind, something that an employee would be assigned to do?
I really think it would be an employee at this point, John.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned the committee, I'd just like to give Carl Geyer his due.
Sure.
For keeping that effort alive for so many years until people were willing to pick up the flag and help him carry it. I think it's fairly dynamic. Things need to happen fairly quickly, and in order to make certain decisions for a committee to meet, to get together, to post, to vote, sometimes that may become a little bit cumbersome in the process.
Yeah, it sounds to me, from what I'm hearing, is that this grant application process is different than other grants that other members of the, other employees of the town write, and therefore there may be justification for this additional stipend. And I don't know if that's how the selectmen ultimately came out, but that's what I'm hearing, with the exception of Mrs.
That
Faniff.
is where the board came out, and so they made the recommendation to the personnel
Ms. Faniff,
board.
am I
that
wrong
that be
in my
included.
summary of what I heard? Or if I am, please, I know you will not hesitate to tell me
Mrs.
if I'm
Faniff was
wrong.
the member in opposition
I
to
said that earlier on.
this, so therefore,
I'm hoping we can backtrack from speaking about an individual, because that was not my intention. My intention was, where does it stop? You have to remember that we have
Right.
other departments that write grants, maybe not of a large sum. Do you get a percentage of that grant? Is that going to become a stipend if you're on the Council on Aging, or you're in the library or the planning board? I mean, it's just, every year are we gonna be facing this request because we're not addressing the job descriptions?
Yeah, I'm not talking about the individual, because in all honesty, I don't even know who the individual is
Right.
we're
So
talking
I-
about, which I think is
even-
better for me to have this discussion.
I think we made it very clear. But no, that's the concern that I have.
Okay.
Every year, you might be looking at a department head coming in and saying, well, I wrote a grant for the Council on Aging, and we put it to good use, and it had to be monitored, or the planning board or some other agency.
Yeah.
But this stipend is to pay someone not to just write a grant or grants, it's to also make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do to maintain the green community's status,
I
right?
understand that, but we also have department heads that run their departments on grants. It's the same
To be
thing.
clear, SAP may have put this into their article as far as the positions changed, but the number's in the budget. So when we say we're approving the budget, we've got the $6,000 in there.
I understand, but for the first time this evening, I heard that the sum of money in the budget reflects a grant that was gonna be paid by the grant. If that's the case, it shouldn't even be in a budget.
What sounds like if we get a grant, you know, when you write a grant, you list all kinds of costs, right, that you think it's gonna cost as far as what you're asking for, and you put admin, so it sounds like they'll put their cost in there, so if they get it approved, it would be reimbursed, but if it's not approved, then we're on the hook for it.
I don't think.
Am I wrong?
Should be in, if anything, it should be in the town administrator's budget.
That's where you want it as far as the budget itself, you think it should be under,
I don't think they should be in individual budgets as a sum of money, as a, no. I think it should be managed by the town administrator to reflect the responsibilities of any department head that participates in a grant program if they met that standard.
I think that's a slippery slope.
Well, address
No,
the job description.
Ms. Brascio?
I'm not going to address that piece, but what I would like to share is that I supported this, and I would just kind of, out of no disrespect to Mrs. Faniff, just kind of give you a couple thoughts as to why I supported this, and I thought this was important. This has been done for 2 years of upwards of savings of close to $400,000 for the town. It was not in this employee's job description, and I don't see where personally I could fit it in. And again, I'm speaking as one member of the board for myself. I looked at the value of what he did, and going forward, the board has asked for it to be in the job description, but that doesn't negate the fact of the time and the energy that was put in by an employee to do something to save the taxpayers a large sum of money over time. So that was one of the reasons I supported it. Another reason was some towns have it in a job description. Some towns have a part-time employee doing it. Some towns have full-time employees, and in all honesty, some just have I don't want to call the person out here, but the person in this position is doing it within their, within their job scope. So it was a lot of different factors for me. Again, I thought it brought great value to the taxpayers, and I wanted to look at it as from the 2 years that this has been done and the time that was reflected in doing this. And it's not to slight any other board or committee or commission or department that does do grants as part of their job, or that they depend on the grants. This was something a little bit separate in my mindset for me, so I can only share with you why it was important for me to be able to do something.
You mentioned the job description is going to be revised. Would there be a corresponding pay impact upon the revision of that job description?
Mr. Purple can probably speak more to how the process with the actual personnel and the SAP, there's a, my understanding is there's a, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a scoring system? Yes, okay, Brian, whoever would like to kind of address that more than me could probably give you a little bit more detail than that.
I'm just wondering the reason for the revision of the job description. I assume there's some compensation issue associated with it such that we wouldn't have to keep addressing this each year?
So there is when the department head or employee has a change to their job description they feel is significant, enough, that change goes to the Personnel Board for consideration. Personnel Board then has a process that is put through for review and a scoring system to determine, based on the pay and classification plan, as to whether that, that change is significant enough that requires a change in grade and/or a monetary adjustment.
And so the job description would change the grade, and then it would be up to the Personnel Board to determine whether or not it's a significant type of activity to merit an increase?
So the change, yes, so the review will determine whether the change will in fact require an increase in grade and/or monetary, and it may not.
Okay, and that would not be done prior to town meeting?
That's correct.
Okay. All my questions have been answered. I'm ready to vote.
Well, that was enlightening. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions? Claire?
Just quickly, I will support this because it actually comes out of the grant money.
Not if
The
they
money
don't get
comes
the
out.
grant.
I just think it is setting a terrible precedent. And I guess my question is because since you have other department heads who are writing grants, then you're only getting one who's getting paid. If he wrote the grant and we did not get the grant, would he be getting the stipend? Nobody knows really the answer to that. But if the answer is no, then essentially what you're doing is you're giving him a commission. The stipend almost is like a commission.
But
However,
the answer is not no. It's my understanding the stipend is in there. He's going to get it, period, whether he is successful about getting grant money or not. He will include the stipend in the cost that he lists for the grant. You know,
right,
we'll start you-
it
but
gets paid
he-
for out of
He's
it.
going to get it regardless of whether he's successful or not.
I just think from a personnel standpoint, it's really creating an absolute mess.
Well, I can tell you tonight, I didn't understand this. I thought, and maybe I didn't hear what got said when Mark was first talking about that at the Board of Selectmen meeting. I thought that we were going to get, like a summer intern who was really good at green stuff to do this. I didn't understand this was a town employee that was going to get an additional stipend above their pay to do this. So now I understand.
The other thing too is that, I'm sorry, but just to finish the train of thought, there's one gentleman I know of in particular who is in the senior tax write-off program, who is so overly qualified that Pam doesn't know what to do with him. And I said, I'll take him. And he did start a grant for the EDC that we applied for, and did it. And Kathy Bartolini has a lot of experience with that and said he did a very, very good job. So the thing is that I think that for some of these grants, to take a look at the very qualified seniors is not a bad idea.
So, Mark, I'm still confused about what's going to happen with this. So the stipend is in the SAP warrant article?
So the money is in the Facilities Department budget.
Right.
However, it has to be approved in the SAP under Article 7 in order for it to be allowed.
So if we approve the budget goes through, right, gets approved.
Yeah.
The money's there, but then, let's say the SAP, that piece of it doesn't get approved,
SAP is Article 7, budget's Article 11.
right? So I understand, so let's say one's yes, one's no. What does that do?
Depends which is yes and which is no.
Okay, so let's assume the budget's yes. Okay, the budget gets approved. No one knows to pull it out. No one knows to hold that piece of it. They don't like 11. They think they're taking care of it with 11, but they've approved 7.
If you don't approve both, it doesn't happen. So let's put it this way. If you approve the SAP and you don't approve the funding, there's no funding source, okay? If you don't approve the SAP, but you approve the money, there's no mechanism to pay it.
Yeah, the reason I asked the questions I did is I disagree with you on the precedent setting, because it's my understanding that this is more than just your typical grant writing. It involves investigation, it involves research, it involves meeting with people, and then it also involves putting pen to paper. So I see it as a grant writing plus type of activity as opposed to just a grant writing activity.
It seems to me that there are a lot of qualified freelancers who could do this, and you wouldn't be in the conundrum that Bonnie's worrying about.
My only concern about conditioning it on a qualified freelancer is that if he or she does not step up to the plate, there's a substantial amount of money that the town may lose out on receiving.
Well, we would hire somebody that would, by definition, step up to the plate. I think $6,000 would hire you a pretty good freelancer. I'll do it for $6,000, and I don't want to do it. So there are going to be plenty of people who would do it.
So Judy, are you saying you want to approve the money, but not the way it's being done? You want them?
If we spend $6,000 and get $250,000, it seems like a good idea. I just don't think you have to tack it onto somebody's job. And that's what Bonnie seems to be worrying about. But there are people who have degrees in grant writing who, this is how they live, doing this kind of stuff. I don't understand why we're trying to squeeze it in.
Again, it's a poor choice of words. It's not just grant writing, it's the management of the grant once you receive it. That's why I think it's,
So split it and hire the grant writer who writes the grant, and then give the other part of it as part of the job to the person who runs the grant when it's functioning.
It sounds like there's a philosophical divide that we're not going to bridge. I would suggest we vote and just get to move forward.
That's fine, John.
Right?
No, we're having fun.
You want me to further convolute the issue? So there are a lot of other, poor Brian. So there are a lot of other communities in the state that are seeing the value of energy management positions. Framingham just established a sustainability coordinator, which is the new fangled title for these, about $70,000. Town of Wellesley did the same thing. Town of Millis has hired a position for about $30,000 part-time to do this work. There's a lot of communities that are hiring full and part-time positions that are doing what we're seeking to do through this stipend. But given the budget and given the fact that we're looking not to increase our FTEs and try to put something else in our budget that we have to continue to support through these next 3 or 4 years, that didn't seem like the correct approach to do that. This seemed to be a more appropriate approach to address the issue rather than to create a brand new position. Given my druthers and money not being an issue, probably would have looked to, establish a new position to address sustainability and maybe to fold a couple of other pieces into it. But this isn't the year.
So, Mark, I know I did, I'm sorry. Just one other question for you. So the stipend is in the budget for this year, but the goal for next year is that the SAP is going to get reviewed and the stipend may not be in there for next year, or is it?
If the job descriptions change, then it would be removed.
I think that would be based on after the job description is reviewed and to see where that all falls out. I think
Okay.
that would be a decision we make next year.
Okay.
Okay.
Support the $6,000 for the stipend?
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? But just to clarify the motion, we're supporting the $6,000 in the facilities budget, right? We will also need to support it in the Article 11, the SAP, right? If we're going to support, we got to support both, right? Makes no sense to support one and not the other. Okay, so motion's been made to support the $6,000 that's in the facilities budget to pay a stipend to a current employee to do what needs to be done to maintain the green community status, including writing grants. Okay. All right, all in favor? So, all opposed? So 5-1.
I brought it up, I had to vote against it.
That's fine, no, that was a healthy discussion, that's good, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, so the last thing that is on the list to talk about as far as the current year budget is something that, actually came up today. All right, so let's change, let's go to budget capital, sorry, Brian, go to the FY '20 articles, and let's change the 450 to 100 for advisory for now, just to see what that does. Yeah, yeah. Which looks like where we may end up, right? So I think that's the most likely way we're going to end up there, right? I think everything else. And, okay, leave it for it. So now let's go back to rev cap and see what that does to the tax rate, so. Yeah, ours would have gone up because we had 0 there. Right, okay, so that makes it, so we're at 3.09, because they've left the 450, and there's, Board of Selectmen are at 3.64, okay, so we're heading in a good direction, so we're both below 4. Okay, now let's focus on, let's go up to the, actually go down to local receipts, okay, and let's highlight the 344, 300. Okay, so everybody see this right here? So what Brian and Mark have forecast for local receipts for fiscal year '20 is basically the same forecast they had for fiscal year '19. So today, Heidi did a great job sending us the breakdown of the local receipts and showed us where they actually stand year to date, and now what they project for the whole fiscal year '19. So 344,400 has grown to almost, it's about $5 million when you look at what she's projecting for the whole year, based on where she stands now and what she thinks is going to happen in the next 4.5 months.
Wait a minute, you said 5 million?
I did. Okay, so, a little bit of an epiphany once I saw that. I called Brian, and he agreed that the actual number is much bigger than the forecast for fiscal year '19. And so I talked about, well, shouldn't we raise this? I mean, to say that 344,400 is close to 5 million is not correct. That's almost 50% off. I've always wondered for the last few years why we had so much free cash. I think this explains why we have a lot of free cash. Because normally, it's human nature to spend your budget, right? EDC had a meeting recently and said we got some money left, let's spend it, right? So I've always wondered where the free cash came from. I've never looked at the details of it. I just assumed it came from various budgets. Everybody had a little bit left over, and it added up.
Kathy, where did the 5 million come from? Where is that?
Can you pull your spreadsheet up that you sent today? Can you get that up here? I've got it. Yeah. So this is what I sent you guys today.
Question, so are you saying that the 3.4, based upon what you've reviewed with Heidi, should be 5?
Yes.
But the selectmen still have the 3.4?
Yes. So let me keep going.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right. Okay, so I mean, this is, we're going into a philosophical discussion too on this too. So, Brian, do you disagree that at least a significant portion of free cash comes from that account, or at least has the last couple of years? Versus budgets?
Not all, yes.
Okay, but a significant amount, right? Okay. Remember too that the town has a little bit of a savings account. We've got some money that we could use if we ended up with a budget problem that really needed to be solved and couldn't be solved any other way. We've got about $400,000 in what we call the stabilization account. So years ago, there was a fairly heated debate between advisory and the Board of Selectmen on what that account should have in it. For the most part, the Board of Selectmen wanted a higher number than advisory. So advisory, mostly John Butler, wrote a paper that I sent to you guys this afternoon. I pulled it up so you can reread it. I know you haven't read it yet. That basically talked about the philosophy of maintaining excess cash at the town level. The conclusion is that we shouldn't do that. We should give it back to the taxpayers. It's their money. And, the next year we need more money, we raise it with real estate taxes, but we shouldn't hold on to money that's really theirs. So that was kind of a philosophical so that year that we were doing this, there was a bunch of excess money. There was a lot of excise tax from cars collected, and we had gotten the money from the telephone post settlement with the companies that own the telephone post. So there was a bunch of money. It's like $1.7 million, $1.8 million at that point. So that account has been brought down over the years to about $400,000. So what I'm saying right now is, by lowballing the expected money from the local receipts, and there's a lot of different ways we get local receipts, but the biggest one by far is the excise tax on cars, which is that, can you go over to the left a little bit, Brian, to show the description of what's in there? Yeah. Okay, so you'll see that that's the very first one, so that's by far the biggest one, right? And then there's a lot of things that go into this, but that's the biggest one. So by being really, 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 really conservative with that number, we basically are doing what advisory didn't want to happen a few years ago. We are holding on to money that we don't necessarily need to. Okay, so now let's go back to the can we go back to the RevCap one and show what changing that would do to things? Okay, so let's go to go back up. So let's go to the line for local receipts, and let's change that, just for discussion, and then to $5 million. No, you're going this wrong line, Brian. Go up 2. So to keep that one, local aid is, we had a good number there. So that is actual local aid. That's a good number. Okay, now let's look at the impact on tax rate. So we've got negative, okay? And then let's drop down and look at what's done to our excess levy capacity. So we're up to a huge number. And remember, everybody wants this number to be big because this is going to help our bond rating, we've been told, right? We're trying to keep AAA. We've got 2 big financings coming up. So we want that bond rating to hold because it affects your interest rate. So that's a really big number. So putting the actual number that we expect for fiscal year 19 into the fiscal year 20 changes things dramatically as far as what to expect. I'm not sitting here saying that we should do it. I just want everybody to understand what's going on with that number. And then give Brian and Mark a chance to weigh into their thought process as far as keeping that number the same as the original projection for fiscal year 19, which we know is a really low number. And I also would point out that one of the reasons that we gave earlier to the public for the initial year-over-year tax increase of close to 9% was that local revenue was going to be flat. So it almost looks like that is a misstatement at this point. So let's go back up and let's ask Mark and I know I'm caught you cold on this tonight, but I did talk to Brian for a minute about it. So what do you think about what I just said as far as this number being so much lower than what reality looks like it is?
Well, first of all, I think I'd like to take a look, obviously at the number and see if there's anything that,
Let's show them where we get, so can you go all the way down, Brian, to Heidi's number down here? Okay, so see the 4 in, let's see, row 65, so in 65, the 4.9, that's where I'm getting my $5 million. Forget the water thing down, that's not, water is separate, so that's where I'm getting $5 million. Okay, so that's where it gets, now let's go back to RevCap and look at
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Kathy, you're talking way too fast for me. I see that number, but then going to the left, the 3.4 number is what is in this year's local revenue, correct?
Mhm.
What's the 1.5, I just lost me. What's the 1.5 to the left of that is what? For the previous year?
Can you go up, Brian, see what's at the top of that column?
That's through December, so that's FY19 actual through December.
And the 4.2 is?
FY18 actual.
So that's actual FY18.
And the 3.4 is?
FY18 estimate.
So estimate, actual, estimate, I'm not sure what 288 is, and then revised projection for the rest of the year.
The reason I went through that exercise is the 4.9 is significantly higher than any of the actuals. Well, it's maybe with the exception of the 4.2, correct?
Well, so fiscal year 18 is a real number, so that's 4.2, that's done,
Yeah, I
okay?
know.
And then she's saying that 4.2, this is Heidi talking, she's saying the 4.2 is gonna grow to 4.9 based on what she thinks, based on past experience. So she thinks at the end of 19, June of 19, we're gonna collect in that revenue line almost $5 million, which is up a lot from fiscal
Yeah.
year 18, no doubt about it.
I mean, this exercise has at least undermined the whole premise of our budget discussions from the get-go. And I just don't, I mean,
Mike.
is there a certain amount of
John.
conservatism?
Mike.
Is there a certain amount of conservatism built into the town number for the excise and the local receipts that we're not taking into account with Heidi's projection?
Here we go. The discussions, I don't want to get too deep into this tonight, John, because it's not a discussion.
You also lose me if you do.
It's actually not a discussion for tonight, but there's a couple of, first of all, this number is not officially set till the fall when the recap is set, the tax rate recap. So we wouldn't change it before town meeting anyways.
Okay.
That's when you officially set this number. The town accountant actually signs off on the number, no one else. So you can say you want it 5 million, I can say I want it 5 million. She signs off on it.
I'm not saying.
Number over here, though. That's
Yep, that's her number.
Okay, that's her number.
But there is a certain level of conservatism. There's reasons for that, because
Right.
the town has
I assume.
decided to use a certain amount of free cash every year. And if you change this significantly, there's cause and effect. You're gonna affect other things.
2 years, we're gonna affect the free
So,
cash, is what we're doing.
Your free cash is gonna be gone, essentially, and you're gonna be in a whole different situation. So that's why it's a broader discussion than
Right.
just,
I still think this is misleading to use such a low number and then,
Well, it is, I think the discussion is, where is the cutoff, what's reasonable and not reasonable? I don't think it's misleading to have a certain amount of conservatism. That actually is reasonable, but you do get to some point, and I don't know what the right point is, where it is unreasonable, so.
I mean, in the for-profit world, no one would take $4.2 million actual and turn that into three whatever. They would take the 4.2 and they would say, okay, what do we think is going to be different, and adjust from there. So they wouldn't roll it back. So there's conservative and there is ultra-conservative, and I would peg this as ultra-conservative. And I understand that if we were to change this in a way that, for our purposes, we use a much more realistic number, and it's going to drive the tax rate down, you're going to collect less money in real estate taxes. I understand 2 years, we won't have that free cash to start out with. I get that. But I still think it should be the town's choice of doing that versus, in my mind, masking what's really going on here.
I wouldn't characterize it as masking, but I
I'm
think it's
trying to-
just,
I'm
it's a
trying to-
policy. It's a philosophy that we have, and like I said, I don't think it's wrong. I just think, other towns have large stabilization funds. This town decided that they didn't want to do that. Doesn't mean
So-
it's wrong in other towns, it just means that there's certain financial policies you put in place.
But
I think this is a good one to a certain extent. But
I
again, the
disagree
argument
with
is
this our
where
philosophy. I don't think this is our philosophy. I think that this just, I don't ever remember advisory ever looking behind that number, because we thought, it was really based on what we thought was going to happen. I think this kind of goes around what advisory's philosophy was. When everybody here reads this paper I just sent everybody today, they're going to see what we said about stabilization. We think it should be very low, unless people hear it. This whole different advisory committee back then
until you need
clarified-
it.
Excuse me?
No, until you need it.
Yeah.
Everyone
But,
thinks it should be low until you need it.
refreshed. But I really think this is a discussion that we should have, and it's not, it's not Heidi to do, it's not you to do, it's not me to do, it's not Lisa to do. It's, again, where do we philosophically think, this excess cash should be? In the residents' pockets, are held by the town. And we're holding another $1.4 million is what we're doing here.
As long as the people know what the risks are, because there are risks to that, and there's very valid risks. So that's why I say it's a more in-depth conversation than just saying, we think that we're going to get $1 million more, so let's raise $1 million more in estimates. It's not that simple. And again, like I said, this number is not set to the fall. So,
And I want to make sure everybody caught what you said a minute ago. So what Brian's saying is that we've only got an estimated change in tax rate here. Yes, the budget's going to be set, but when he sits down with Paul Sabelli in November, December, whenever they get together to really set the tax rate for fiscal year 20, Brian's going to take a look at the actual revenue that has been received at that point, and he may say, okay, we don't need as much as I thought we did because the revenue really is going great, or vice versa. So he
Right.
will adjust it. But I asked you this before. You may not remember. We had this conversation, and I thought you said to me, you usually don't adjust it much from what the original, what you showed.
no,
the
that's
town.
true. It doesn't usually adjust much. It does adjust. We've adjusted it several times over the past several years, but not a whole, not millions of dollars, not 500,000, nothing like that. If you look at column J, that's part of the reason we don't do anything right now. It's through December 31st.
Don't know.
Right, so it's $289,000 out of all that money that we know right now.
And
That's not a whole
excess
lot.
taxes is a big explanation for why it's so much bigger. I mean,
It
2.2
is.
to 2.7.
And that's why you set this in the fall, because you know these numbers much better.
But making the statement that I think local revenue is flat, I think is just incorrect. Because it's not, I mean, it's certainly not flat from 18 to 19 if this.
Could be less. I mean, it could be a year, it could be less from the prior year, the actuals.
But right now, it certainly doesn't look like that. Based, I mean, she's saying it's $5 million. So it's hard to say that you can say convincingly that it's going to be less. It doesn't look flat to me, nor does it look like it's less. It looks like it's a lot more.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know where it's gonna land because the excise commitments are so big, it can swing it if there's one that goes lower. In the building permits are usually the other area that can really swing things. Sometimes they can really fluctuate. So you got a couple of areas in here that fluctuate quite a bit, and that's why you gotta be cautious, just, especially at this time of year. Like I said, half the year, especially that first half of the year, which I have said to many people, through December is kind of not useless, but not very valuable either.
Okay, so can you go down so we look at fiscal year 18 again, which is in the books, right? This money's in the bank. We know it's $4.2 million, 4.5, right? That's a real number there.
Local
Right.
receipts.
Right, 18 is set, yep.
So that's set. And so then to say that 4.2 is going to drop to 3, what's our number here? 3.4? I mean, that's a huge drop. That's not 10%. It's
Oh, no, I know. Like I said, there's a certain amount of conservatism built into this, absolutely. But there's reasons for that, again. It's a discussion, again, I don't want to get in too weedy tonight, but, you know, it is what it is.
So this number always has upside, right? You're shielding the bottom. You're not gonna have less than 3-4.
Right. Some communities do go to what I'd call more of a actual budget estimation, whether because they have to, the circumstances they're in, and they get into trouble. I'll be honest, they absolutely do, because they'll have negative free cash. There's something called negative free cash. If the receipts come in lower than you think, now you've got the problem with the tax rate the other way. You know, so it's nice to say go, you know, to. And I don't think Kathy's suggesting to go right to the limit anyways, but you just got to be careful. You got to weigh the pros and cons of the whole thing.
Can you, when you send the reports to Mass for them to certify each year, including certifying free cash, do you show them in detail how we get to the free cash? Do they see it department by department? Do you have a computation that shows how we got to the $1.4 million free cash?
Absolutely, because they have to certify it,
All right,
so
but
they go
but
through
it's
it.
broken down in detail. We can see where it came from.
Oh, yeah.
So can you send that to us?
I
so
think
we can
Heidi
see it?
has that for each year. She has a well, it depends how detailed you want. I think she has a summary thing of turnbacks, you know, excess funds. There's some other transfers and stuff. Or she has it, I think, to the point where it's by department even, but turnbacks.
So I think that would be helpful
So-
for us to see as far as where free cash is
Yeah,
really coming
yeah,
from.
yeah. That can be done.
Can I ask a question? I'm not sure if you're the right person to explain this, but if you are, could you?
Well, I
talk
can refer it to who it is, yeah.
Could you walk through what happens with free cash and if we don't use it in that fiscal year, and what needs to be done in order, what authorizations are needed in order for it
If
to be
it's
used?
not used in the fiscal year, it carries forward like almost like an article, sorta. So we've never done that in Southborough. Doesn't mean we won't, but it just means we never have. So if we had $100,000 of free cash from last year, we used 90 of it, so there's 10. So now that 10 rolls forward in the computation for, there's a couple things. You could use it during the year, so it sits there. So you could actually have a special town meeting and say we have $10,000 in extra free cash that's sitting there. We're going to appropriate it because it's free for appropriation. Not
But
free,
we've never
but
done
it's.
that I can.
We've never done that. We could, or it would roll to the beginning, sort of like the beginning balance of the next fiscal year and the computation for that. So now at the end of that free cash, you're going to have the new free cash number, which includes the old and the
So
current
Chelsea,
year.
it's really money in the bank. We're really starting with that money in the bank for the next year. So they certified it at the end of the year. That's why we can't use it for the next year. It's got to jump 2 years.
Right.
So that
Jumps 2
so
years.
it's our starting point. We've got that money in the bank. So I still say instead of stabilization being 400, we really have $2 million in stabilization. Is the other way to look at it. So really are starting with that much extra money by doing what we're doing here. Any other comments?
It's obviously a significant discussion,
It is.
and it's not one that should have tonight.
No?
But
So I
it's
suggest
certainly
everybody
one,
read what I sent them, as far as I mean, you were definitely part of that. So read the paper I sent
I
you
read
as
it.
far as what
I read
advisory
it.
did years ago.
I read it.
Okay, already?
Yeah.
You're fast. So it is not to decide tonight?
No, but I think we should try to have some sort of a joint position on local receipts prior to town meeting.
Well, we've got to, this is not part of the budget, but we've got to get
It
up
is
to
part
town.
of why isn't it
because we're
part-
going to show them what we think the year-over-year tax increase is.
Why isn't it part of the budget?
Well, we don't approve that. That's not approved by the warrant Article 7. It's the budget, the $55 million expenditure. That's what we're approving. But what we do show the audience is what we expect the year-over-year tax increase is going to be, and that's why this discussion is totally relevant, because you basically say, look, this is our budget, $55 million. This is what we think we're going to receive from everything but the taxes, so this is what we've got to raise from the taxes. And that's what we do show them.
So I do think it's part of the budget.
It's definitely part of the budget discussion, yes, but this is not part of warrant. It's not something you officially vote on. You show the town on a
Right.
slide.
Again, I would just suggest that we come to an understanding or an agreement with regards to these revenue sources, because to try to have this discussion on town meeting floor, I think it's somewhat, it was difficult to follow you one-on-one, and
No.
I just think it might be difficult to have.
You don't want to be
Last time, though,
starting
it was a
tax
challenging
rate
discussion.
setting
Well, with
policy.
regards
on-
to the amount of stabilization.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
But I think it relates to the philosophy of
How much
free
you
cash.
keep, yeah, how much cash you keep in your savings account, your town savings account.
So what do you propose, Madam Chair?
I'm not sure what I propose. I just wanted to make sure that this only happened today, literally, as far as understanding this piece of it. So I really haven't thought through what I think. I did say to Brian, what if we raise your, forecast a little bit, a couple $100,000? He said, we can talk about that. So I think he's probably willing to go up a little bit. Okay,
Maybe.
is that good? All right, so we'll discuss it.
But a lot of it's got to depend on what happens the next 3 or 4 months. It's not going to be next week, I'm going to say, let's raise it. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen by any of us. So we really need
let me
to-
ask a completely unrelated question.
Mhm.
Throughout my decade of dealing with town budgets, the question is, or the comment is, we'll see what happens in 3 or 4 months. Why don't we have town meeting in 3 or 4 months later than when we have it? In other words, there'd be a lot more
Goodness, I'd like that.
certainty. There'd be a lot more certainty, would there not,
It
in
would.
terms of the numbers?
The schools
And
would love that, too.
Is there a prohibition of having annual town meeting in the fall.
Now, we've talked about that before, and you know, a lot of communities have it in June for the reason because of the timing of municipal.
Mark,
Items,
is
but-
that something that would be ripe for discussion or not? Maybe it's completely off.
No, that's fine. I thought the issue was winding down, but this is just gonna prolong it. So, no, I mean, look, this was the discussion that probably should have been had at the special town meeting last year, and we decided to move the town meeting up. You know, we have these issues that we don't have time to discuss. You know, we try to move the process along as quickly as possible. You know, we're getting into discussions, which is my version of making sausage in public, you know, that really are discussions that need to be held, you know, behind the scenes to decide how we want to move forward and what these things are. This type of discussion should be happening in September and October, rather than, you know, 2 weeks or a week and a half before the warrant goes to print.
Okay,
So,
in a perfect world, yes, but it didn't.
Right.
I don't agree that this should be behind the scenes. This should be an open discussion. We can't discuss this stuff behind the scenes. If you want all 5 people to
oh,
be
sure
part
you
of it,
can, Kathy. No,
not-
Kathy, this is a discussion where we need to have a, you know, before we get into the process, to discuss how we're gonna handle the revenues and what numbers we're gonna agree upon to move forward and build our budget upon. This isn't something you build the budget upon.
Well,
and
I would
then
push
have
back
the
and say
discussion
you guys
about
maybe should have done
the foundation
a better
after the fact.
explanation as to how you build it. I mean, I was at the meeting where you said we think revenues are going to be flat. That's
Mm-hmm.
not what this shows at all. So I think it was incumbent upon you and Brian to explain what you're doing with this local receipts number, and you didn't. So it wasn't until we got the detail that we really understood this. So I would, you know, yeah, we should have done it before, but we also should have understood more details before too. And, you know, we just haven't had that discussion at all.
Right.
So
And moving forward, we can do that. All I'm saying is we're sitting here at the 11th hour and, you know, looking to rebuild everything, which, if that's the purview, then that's fine. But I think that's a larger discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all agree we're not going to decide it tonight. It's too new. We've got lots of info to digest. I want everybody to read what I sent. John's already read it, but I don't think everybody else has. And we will continue to discuss it at a later meeting. Okay. But just understanding that moving that number just a little bit would change the tax rate. So, you know, if somebody wants that rate to come down further, that would be a legitimate way to do it.
Yeah, before we close the discussion, though, I do think, again, I often suggest this, a joint meeting whereby we can come to a recommendation for town meeting jointly, as opposed to having a very disparate budget between advisory has local receipts at X and selectmen that has local receipts at Y. And I think,
But the way this would work out, I think practically, we're still not changing the actual budget, the
we're
expense,
changing the
expense
tax,
side of it.
we're changing the
Expense side of it.
tax consequences.
Right. So the only thing we really could do if we really felt strongly about doing this is when advisory has its chance to talk to the town, is to present a slide that says that if we use a different estimate for revenue than what the town finance committee wants to use, then this would be the impact on your taxes year over year. I mean, that's how you'd have to do it. But then setting that tax rate really is, you know, a different process. That happens in December with Brian sitting down with Paul Sabelli and saying, this is what I really think you need to raise. So you still would have to be part of that process too. And I'm not sure how I really even thought this, I don't know how we get part of that process. We can talk to the town, but it still doesn't change what Brian does in December when he sits down. He may still say, I don't agree, and this is what I think the local revenue is going to be, and this is what I'm going to use when I sit down with Paul. So we'd have to find a way to convince everybody that our view is the better view, if that's what we think.
Yeah, I'm not so much in favor of convincing people. I think I just want there to be certain objectivity. In other words, you know what, this is not an issue of convincing, this is how we get to the local receipt number, and this is what we are suggesting is the local receipt number. And if we could do that in a certain degree of unanimity, I think it's better if we can get there. Maybe we can't, but my sense is that there is always room for getting to the point where we can present at town meeting what those numbers are and the backup for those numbers. And like I said, my preference would be able to go in with an agreed upon number if we could do that.
And I think what you could also say to the town is, look, we really have a lot more in our savings account than what is in stabilization, we think at this point. The year's not over with, but based on what we think, based on the best projection that the town accountant has done, we really think there's a lot more money in that, because that's where our free cash is really coming from. So when we see Brian's report that shows where it came from last year, I think that will help us in our next discussion as far as really understanding what's going on here. I think, and I'm guessing now, that it's going to show that that free cash is in large part from this number, but we'll see.
I just have a quick question. Brian, without getting into the weeds, when you when you say that every year, it depends on the next 3 to 4 months, is there that much of it, with the big items that make the number fluctuate, is there that much of a difference year to year, or some surprises, I guess, is really another way
It
to put it?
depends what category you're talking about. And for instance, like I said, the building permits, because some permits, even individual permits, can be so large. Yes. Excise, we were actually in a slightly growth period for several years, and we just found the last couple years, maybe 2 years, and we don't know quite yet with this year, but it is flattening out. You can see it, and actually it's a little lower, which is, it's a little bit of a concern to us, at least. It's not millions of dollars, but it's a concern because it was one of our little growth areas, and it's not happening anymore.
Well, but
So-
she's projecting $400,000 in fiscal year 19 more than fiscal year 18, so you don't think she's right?
No, she does. I think her thing is based on a formula. If you look at her projections, I think it's formula-based. So some of that, I see why she does that. It's formula-based. That works for some things that is steady every month throughout the year. And then, because we've had that discussion, but she's got other categories that like transfer station stickers, you just collect all of them in 3 months. So if you go off say you picked a month that they weren't collected, you'd say we're going to collect $500 for the year. But, we get a few $100,000. So it just fluctuates with certain areas. But I'm not saying we won't raise these. I don't want to, if I came off like that, I'm not saying we won't raise them. I'm just saying we kind of need to see that next few months of local receipts. But we can revisit it anyways. And to be fair to Mark and Heidi and myself, she just got back and put those December figures in. I didn't really look at them too closely. Mark hasn't looked at them at all. So we need to look at them. There's things like interest income that last year has changed a lot. For those of you who don't know, or maybe you do know because your bank accounts, suddenly the interest rates are
Going up?
a little bit going up, which you hate when you go to take a loan, but when you have town money that's earning money, it makes a big difference. So we had years back when I first started, I think our investment income was about $700,000 or $800,000, believe it or not, and it went down to 70. And see, that's how the local receipts can also dip. So now we're actually, and Kathy, you know this, we're in an interest rate rising environment. So we do have to take a look and
So I just had a meeting today where, interest rates have gone from 30 basis points to 2.5 right now. So you
Yeah.
get a Treasury-backed money market right now for 2.5%. So they're up a lot. But
So the
one
whole
fact-
issue is, yes, I do agree there may be room for change. I just don't want to, I didn't want to commit to anything tonight. We got to look at it, and it's just a little bit more complicated of an issue, that's all.
But the number that's in the bank, though, just keep in mind, is 4.25 from fiscal year 18. That's in the bank. That was a real number. And we're saying that for fiscal year 19, that number's kind of fallen off the cliff. We're going down to, 3.4. So that's where I think we've
Well,
really just gone.
Just to clarify, I don't think we're thinking it's gonna go down to 3-4. I think there's a conscious policy to have some level of free cash guaranteed. And that's began way before me.
That's the first time I've heard you say that, is my point.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah,
so
maybe this
I
issue
think
is
that's
never
what
really,
it is.
yeah,
It's not that we think revenue's flat. We're trying to consciously keep that free cash number
Right.
up there. So
right.
I agree that that is the accurate way to describe that.
And I also agree that there's, like I said, there's boundaries to that. I mean, if this number was $1 million, I think it's so ridiculous that people wouldn't even believe us, you know? So, I mean, you gotta be,
If what's $1 million?
I mean, if I had the local receipts here as $1 million, you know, just switch it to $1 million instead of 3, that's so far out of the realistic that you can't even you know, I'm saying that
That's
you,
at $3.5, $4 million if you did that, so,
Yeah, so-
okay.
I'm,
All right,
so yes, yeah,
does anybody else want to talk anymore? I think we probably have started
beat that to death.
a discussion that will continue. Okay, all right. Okay, so just to recap, we have agreed with the Board of Selectmen on the budget itself, the operational budget, which is, can we go back to
Oops.
RevCap?
Sorry, I thought you were done with it.
Who's that?
That's my daughter.
That's your daughter?
Yeah. She wouldn't like that. Okay, here we go.
Thanks, Dad. So can we go down to the bottom, just look at what
Yep.
the total is? So we have basically approved the, what's in F53, the 54,659,857.
Correct.
Now, that may change a little bit more. The schools may come down a
The
little bit.
schools, yes.
Algonquin may
Yep.
come down a little bit more.
Yep.
I think the other schools are set at this point,
Yes,
right? So I don't know if anything else that's going to change at this point, other than possibly Algonquin.
nothing. I don't think. I'm not aware of anything.
So that's what we have basically asked the town to spend for fiscal year '20, is that $55 million. Yep. And we're on the same page with Board of Selectmen as
Yep.
far as that number goes. Okay. All right.
Except they still have the 450
Right.
in for the library.
Yes, but that's in
that's
the
the only
warrant
thing.
article,
Okay.
so, actually,
Well, I'll tell.
they're in there, so I beg your pardon. So we've agreed on the operational portion of this, that's how I
Correct,
should have said that, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then we got a plan to resolve the other ones on March the 5th.
That's the number.
So we've set our piece on the operational piece, right? We're ready to go there. Okay, so that was the plan for tonight. There's some things that people want to talk to us about, but they're not current year budget related. Mr. Stivers wants to talk to us about some transfer station issues, so I'm going to postpone that till we get past this completely, and can think about other things besides numbers, go. Okay? No,
No,
I know I'm
no,
saying,
no.
I'm gonna postpone that to another meeting where we really have time to listen to you and not be worried about local receipts. Excuse me?
It is relevant to the FY20 budget, I think, so hopefully before that gets locked down.
Well, come on up then. I didn't think it was, so I'm not sure what can, that's what it sounds like. So come on up. So this is,
Thank you. Sam Stivers, Presidential Drive. Member of the Public Works Planning Board, but I'm speaking as a private citizen, not as a member of the Public Works Planning Board. There are 2 points here. One, relative to the current budget, FY20, and then there's a longer-term piece that I won't spend a lot of time on. But I'm responding to questions that the Board of Selectmen raised some time ago, and then advisory raised in a conversation about the transfer station relative to opportunities for thinking differently about generating revenue and managing costs in that area. I have requested a meeting of the Public Works Planning Board to try to address that, and that meeting has not happened. So given the time pressure here, I decided to go ahead as an individual and put some things together based on reports that PWPBB has done over the last 15 years or so relative to the issue, and thinking about is there opportunity for near-term revenue or cost reduction. A lot of moving parts here, but the bottom line is currently the transfer station generates about $500,000 in cost annually and about $370,000 plus or minus in sticker fees. And the net drain there is about $130,000 or so each year that the tax base covers. Public Works Planning Board back in, I think it was October or August of last year, made a recommendation that we move toward absorbing the cost of the transfer station into the tax base and reducing the sticker fee cost. So that is underway, I guess, now, although I'm not sure exactly where that stands. If you think about the question of where you try to find money for the near term, and this was done, I guess, a month or so ago when it looked like things were tighter than they are, I guess, tonight. But one option is to think about making the transfer station operation fully funded by the sticker fees. Obviously not something that would be popular, and I'm not making any particular recommendation. I'm just trying to lay out what the choices are. And if you did that, you would pick up about $130,000 in terms of money that currently is being absorbed in the tax base. And that's obviously a policy issue that the selectmen need to decide on as they set the transfer station sticker fees, but there's an opportunity to think about that a little differently.
Sam, what would the per sticker increase be approximately? Do you know?
I actually didn't calculate that. But,
sorry for interrupting.
But there are about 2,000 stickers, and so for $130,000, what's that, $60 or something like that? Yeah, roughly, I think. I can't do the math fast enough, but and then another choice that the Public Works Planning Board has looked at over the years is to cut back on hours for the transfer station. So instead of being open Wednesday through Saturday, maybe do Saturdays and one other day or something like that, or maybe shorter time during the days. That can save a little bit of money, but it doesn't have as big an impact on staffing, for example, there. And so my totally ballpark estimate is you might think, but save $50,000 or something like that. So again, there's a way to do that. Not clear that the public likes the more open hours. In fact, people have asked for Sunday hours. So that might be a tougher one to sell politically, but that's again a policy decision that the selectmen might want to make. So that in a nutshell is the short-term issue, which I think is not an easy thing to do. But as you think about longer-term issues, I think they open up a range of possibilities that the Public Works Planning Board has looked at, all the way from closing the transfer station, which, again, we're spending roughly $500,000 for the trash operation there, so that's $500,000. If you did that, though, people would have to hire private haulers. And there's a variety of opinions on whether people would wind up paying more money, less money there. You could do things like privatize the transfer station operation, or you could actually pay private haulers to do trash pickup around town and not need the transfer station. So a lot of choices there, but there's one interesting new factor that has come up, which is the fact that China has been buying most of the recycled plastic and paper product for quite a while to feed their manufacturing activity. Not long ago, they closed that door, and they didn't say we're not going to take any more. What they did was they said we're going to increase the standard for cleanliness of the recycled product. So typically, people have been sending stuff that had as much as 3, 4, 5% contaminants in that product. They changed the standard to 0.5% contaminants for stuff they would take, and that effectively closed the door. So recently in the Metro West Daily News, there was a picture of a guy at E.L. Harvey, our hauler, surrounded by massive piles of bundled recyclables and saying, what are we going to do with this? We're going crazy. And all the haulers are suffering from the same fate. So there's a real problem there because, in fact, if you look in this package, there's a picture of our trash flow through the station. We get about roughly 4,000 tons a year. 1,000 of that gets recycled, 3,000 goes into the hopper, and we pay for the disposal of it. If, in fact, you look at a future that we're looking at right now where instead of actually either getting paid for the recycled stuff, which we in the distant past did, I think, or having that hauled away at no cost, which is the more recent past, we're now looking at paying roughly the same amount to haul away the recycled stuff as we do the stuff that goes in the hopper. So there's no financial incentive for recycling there, which is disturbing. And in fact, the question becomes, what do you do about that going forward? Some towns are looking at mass to energy conversion, burning the recycled stuff. That creates other problems with environmental, exhaust, dirty exhaust kind of stuff. People are trying to figure out what to do with it. If in fact we find a hauler who has some other way to dispose of it, that's an interesting option. I don't know if there are any of them out there, but I think we need to consider that. I know Mr. Rooney has been a fan of pay-as-you-throw historically, and that's a great strategy to, in fact, change the proportion of hopper trash to recycled trash. But if it costs us the same, then pay-as-you-throw doesn't help us that much. Some people believe that pay-as-you-throw will actually reduce the quantity of trash some. But in fact, again, seems to me that that's a tough argument because people are going to have X amount of trash, and if they're paying for it, what do? Pile it up at home? I don't know. But the other side of that is if you actually get tough about what you'll take at the transfer station, there's anecdotal data that says that people tend to use other devices like throwing it beside the road, dumping it in their neighbor's woods, or those kind of things that create problems of another kind. And so you got to be careful about pushing on one side of the balloon and having it pop out on the other side. So again, I think that these are some of the important longer-term issues, and as we think about financial impact of these kind of things, there are questions about how we deal with this going forward and how we balance the cost between the tax base versus individual homeowner costs, because people are going to have to either pay the town to do it or pay private haulers to do this. And I think there's some tough policy choices that are coming down the road, unless some miracle happens and China opens up and starts buying material again. But given the current tension, if I were China, I wouldn't be too unhappy by saying, we're going to close the door and let them, get covered up by their own trash kind of thing. Sort of seems to be what's happening. So again, I don't have a perfect solution. I'm hoping to work with the Public Works Planning Board to address this going forward, but I think there are some interesting longer-term issues that the town is going to have to face along with everybody else. I think there's value in actually getting out ahead of this thing, because I'm reminded of the old story of two hikers in the deep woods, and they hear loud noises in the woods, and one of them says, gee, I think that sounds like a bear. I don't think we can outrun that bear. And the second hiker turns to him and says, all I got to do is outrun you. So if, in fact, we can get ahead of the other towns in dealing with this stuff, I think that there is some value in starting to think about it and trying to find solutions that we may be in a pinch, but if other people are in more of a pinch, then that puts some pressure on the state or other organizations, federal government, to figure out what to do about it, and we at least defer the most pain. So the other chart in here, just for your reference, Southborough generates a lot of trash. The state has done a look at trash flow across the communities, and that chart shows that Southborough is one on the high end of towns that generate trash, which compounds our problem. That's what it says on a per capita basis. So anyway, we got a problem. It's not going to go away, and we got to figure out how to deal with it. There's not a lot of short-term pressure. I've heard DPW estimate that it's going to cost us $3.5 million to redo the transfer station. Did a quick calculation here. If we actually bonded that over 20, 25 years, that bumps the sticker price by around $100 a year for the stickers. So we could actually do something like that and pay for it without charging a huge additional amount, but that would still be an obvious cost to the taxpayers. So all those are options. Again, I make no recommendations. I speak only for myself in this, but I think it's important to get this on the radar screen for Public Works Planning Board, Board of Selectmen Advisory, to understand what's coming and know that we've got to figure out some, I hope, creative ways to deal with it. So that's my pitch, high-level version.
So Sam, as far as fiscal year 20 impact, are the sticker prices going down for fiscal year 20?
I actually don't know for sure. The proposal from August was to a 3-year phase-in to again, take the $130,000 or so down to, or up to a smaller number, basically down for the sticker prices. So
So it'd be interesting to know. I didn't think they were going, I thought they were staying the same, so I don't know the answer to
that was the report that I saw, said they want to go down ultimately like $50 a head.
So that's phase one of trying to.
Move it into the tax base, yeah.
And then as far as the impact of Harvey not being able to take our recycled trash.
Well, they'll take it, they'll just raise the prices.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So as far as it costing us nothing now, which I think is the case today,
I'm not positive about that. I've heard Ms. Galligan say that the prices are going up toward
Costs us now.
but is that in
the
her
hopper
budget?
trash.
I assume it is, because it does cost
So that's
us.
what, so does anybody know whether she's put that in her
Yeah.
budget?
Yeah, if we got about 1,000 tons a year, and if it costs $70 a ton, which is what the hopper trash costs, I think 65 or 70, that's $65,000-$70,000. So that's, sizable amount of money, but not millions, certainly.
I mean, her budget's only going up 1% or so, so I don't
Right,
know
yeah,
how
I
she
don't
can
know- I
bury
don't-
too much new
And
stuff in
I
there.
don't know the answer to that. That's a
Sam,
question I have.
This
for
is
the Public Works.
extraordinary work.
Well, a
and
lot of that stuff comes out of what Public Works Planning Board has done over the last 15 years.
I
here,
just
so-
have a question. I mean, one of the rationales for a usage-based system is it causes a change in behavior and people
Right.
tend to recycle more.
Right,
But if the costs of recycling are equal to the costs of raw
Right.
trash, maybe not the right term, that's
Yeah,
thrown
yeah.
into the hopper,
right.
and there's no recycling going on, i.e. based upon the China
Nobody's buying it,
change,
yeah.
then what incentive is there for people to recycle?
That's one of my points, very little, yeah. And so if you can find a way to incent people to produce less trash, the old reuse, return,
Yeah.
recycle, or whatever, I can't remember.
Want to reduce, and then
Reduce,
and then recycle.
reuse, recycle, yeah.
3 Rs.
That would be very helpful. That's a tough social change. I mean, I sadly have spent a lot of time at the transfer station collecting signatures for various things, and I'm impressed that there are a lot of people who actually are very dedicated recyclers, but there are also a lot of people who don't seem to care and who are throwing stuff in the wrong places. So I think it's a tough sell to get everybody to behave more in a disciplined way about throwing stuff away. Could happen, and it would be nice, again, to try to think creatively about how to motivate that kind of behavior if we can.
So, and what you're saying, though, is that if the cost of the stickers remain the same and the current cost of operating the transfer station remains the same, we end up with a $135,000 deficit in terms of the sticker
That goes into the
offset
tax
to
base.
that goes
Yeah.
into the tax
Today,
base.
yeah. So I mean, there is short-term money there if that was an acceptable policy option, which, again, that would certainly not be popular.
And you're saying short-term money increase the sticker price, or
Yeah,
change the senior program, some combo of
yeah,
that.
yeah,
too.
you could play with those numbers a little bit, but not big numbers, but again, this was, a month or so ago when it looked like every $20,000, $30,000 was gonna be.
Sam, have you
fairly-
presented this to the selectmen?
Have not.
Okay.
I would start with the Public Works Planning Board to get an official position, which I remain eager to do, so.
Any idea how many free stickers we give out each year?
Don't know, not too many. There's a hardship program that various organizations, I think Senior Center and Youth and Family Services, talk to people who have financial hardship, and then they make recommendations for no-fee stickers, which I think is a good thing, and under any circumstances, I would certainly support that. But I don't know the number, but it's not thousands, certainly. I think we had like 2,000 some odd pay stickers, roughly.
Senior stickers are free.
Excuse me?
Senior stickers are free.
Free, yeah, which is another interesting option to, that's been discussed but rejected historically. So I think there might be like 1,000 senior stickers or something, so if that was,
That's a lot.
yeah. Being a senior, I'm conflicted about that one, but
Sam,
my
I'll
trash is
loan you
just
the
as
money if
costly.
you need it on that.
my trash is just as costly as yours, I think. So,
Mr. Litt?
So I can answer some of the questions because I was at the Public Works Planning Board meetings when this came up, both last January and in August or
Right,
September.
answer
whatever it
away.
was. So the Public Works Planning Board has, for quite some time, argued that it belongs in the tax base. Personally, I happen to agree with that. The proposal that they put together was put together in conjunction with Brian Ballantyne in terms of, what did it look like for phasing. The selectmen last June, I think, when the sticker prices were set for the current year, indicated that they would be interested in at least a discussion about going this way. That statement was repeated at a Board of Selectmen meeting this fall, but nothing ever happened because everyone felt the budget was in such terrible shape. And finally, in terms of what the price will be, no one knows. The sticker price is set typically in June at a Board of Selectmen meeting.
Well, I'm just interested in, just for purposes of expediency, the impact for this budget season, as opposed to bigger picture issues that I don't think we should try to solve.
Yeah, and there are some money options
Yeah,
for
you put-
FY '20 that are available, should the
them on the
selectmen
third
decide
day,
they
right.
want to do some of these things.
Yeah.
So in June, when they set it for
For September, it was
September,
as the
they
following.
could certainly raise it, which means you're going to have more free cash.
Or lower it for less free cash.
What's that?
Lower it for less free cash.
Yeah, so they could change that. So that's the one thing they still, that will have nothing to do with town meeting, they can still do that.
Sam, the $50,000 reduction of hours, is that one day, 50,000 or not?
There are different ways you could do that, and that's, total high-level estimate kind of thing. So you,
But the 50,000, how did you come to that number? Is that for one day closing that's presently open or multiple days?
I looked at a couple of things, close one day or close, limit hours
Right.
on a couple of days. And it's difficult because not clear, I've not talked with Ms. Galligan about how she would staff that, in the sense there is a full-time person, there are a couple of full-time people, I guess. And if you started thinking about using part-timers instead of full-time people, maybe you could get more savings, but again, I don't have any firm numbers on that. So I just think that if you don't change the full-time, part-time staffing thing, then you don't save as much. If you think about changing those staffing positions to part-time, then you might be able to save a little more.
Makes sense.
But again, I just want to raise the point, there are some options relative to this, if the selectmen choose to make those kind of decisions. And, if money is really tight, maybe you think about those things. If not, clearly it's not, basically the surveys all show that people want free stickers and lots of hours. So, and no limits on what they throw. Yeah, so,
More swap shops.
Right, no
that's
tax
right.
evasion.
So it's hard to know from the survey. So anyway,
So thank you,
appreciate
Sam,
the
for-
opportunity to chat, and I think that's, again, something that's worth putting on the table, but, I look to others to make recommendations about what to do.
So Sam, just one quick question. Is the Public Works Planning Board, and I know that you haven't had a meeting since you were appointed, is
Correct.
that right?
Correct.
Which is kind of a interesting thing. I mean, they need to meet to discuss some of these things. What I don't understand is you have a contractor who lives here in town, has a sticker,
Right.
okay? They dump all of their contracting stuff. I know because I've seen it. And I mean, that just to me, I remember when we lived in Wellesley, it was separated out,
Yep,
If you
yep.
had contracting stuff, you put your truck on the scale and
Yep.
it got weighed and you
Public
paid
Works Planning Board
appropriately.
has discussed that kind of thing in terms of better enforcement of people who don't have stickers, and in fact, the town clerk has been doing some of that, as well as enforcing contractors. But if you look at the money, I have no direct knowledge of those numbers, but if you think about somebody's, dumping out of 3,000 tons that goes into the hopper, for example, if there's 100 tons or something of stuff that belongs to contractors that shouldn't be there, at $70 a ton, that's $7,000. So, that's money in the town's pocket potentially, but it's not something that's gonna, I think, make night and day, here's $1 million that we didn't know was there kind of thing, so.
We've got a vacation home in Gallatin, Tennessee, and that's how they do everybody. You drive your car up,
Yep.
they weigh it, and then you drive, when you leave, they weigh it, and you go in and you pay them.
Yep.
It's pretty neat. Yeah, it's very high tech. It's pretty cool.
That's right.
That's right.
So you actually have your family inside the transfer station, they hop in the car before you go out. And they pay you because you're lighter when you went in. Okay. Anyway, so food for thought, no easy answers, but it's something that I think ought to be on the table for discussion as we go along here, both short-term as well as long-term. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Motion to adjourn? Judy? Second? 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 Okay. All in favor? 9:45. Okay.